Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. Trump loses his mind and declares full naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. That ain't gonna work. Before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, this is a very big mistake. Your grocery bills and gas bills will be going up. A sign of Trump and the U.S. military's weakness. Go into the straits. Don't talk about harassing people outside the straits. Let's get right into the content. Salute.
Blockade last night has declared a naval blockade of Iran. This is literally minutes ago. President Trump on Truth Social writes, there you have it. The meeting went well. Most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. That is really important. I'll get to that in just a second. At some point, we will reach an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out basis, but Iran has not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about. This is world extortion, and leaders in countries, especially the United States of America, will never be extorted. I've also instructed our Navy, this is even more important. I've also instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has already paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. This is piracy. We will also begin destroying the mines the Iranians laid in the straits. Any Iranian who fires at us or peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. Iran knows better than anyone how to end this situation, which has already devastated their country. The Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Their anti-aircraft and radar, all useless. Khomeini, most of their leaders are dead because their nuclear ambitions. This blockade will begin shortly. Other countries will be involved in the blockade. One imagines he's going to put more pressure on NATO to join in. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion. They want money, and more importantly, they want nuclear. Additionally, and at an appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded, and our military will finish up the little that is left of Iran. So pretty much in broad terms there, President Trump has just flat out said the war is about to begin, and we are now ramping things up a couple of notches, not even one notch, really. Because when you take a look at the statement that we're going to blockade everything going in and coming out, that by itself is a major escalation. And then that they're also going to hunt down any vessels that have already paid the toll and been passed through that Iran allowed. You can see with now, then you're talking about potentially other countries being involved, like China. Many of the ships that have gone through with a toll being paid in Chinese yuan, and many of them were specifically headed to China. Is President Trump willing and ready to actually potentially bring China into this? That's what's on the table here. And listen, there is no, international law is long since been destroyed, so there's really no point in talking about that. But there's certainly no international law that allows you to unilaterally, any country, to just say, I don't like the policies being employed here, and I don't like what they're doing, so I'm going to go to the open seas, and anybody who ships to doing something I don't like, I'm going to interdict them. That's piracy, and that's what we're talking about here. But listen, you got to understand the price of oil has been held in check. It's been right around $100 a barrel. Every time it gets a little above that, Trump does something or says something that calms the market down and brings it a little bit lower. And then they kept it. It's been pretty successful at around $100 a barrel. Now, remember some of the key ways that he did that. He, first of all, relieved sanctions on Russia so that they could export more. And then one of the bigger surprises early in the war, he relieved a lot of the sanctions on Iran itself to allow them to ship out more oil. And that had its effect that it lowered the price of oil. But here's the problem, is that also gave money to Iran and some confidence, and that gave them the ability to actually control the strait. Apparently, that's something that President Trump has come to agree with. Now, there was an interesting statement by Richard Haas, the chief of the Council on Foreign Relations. This was put out by Dropsite News. To watch this, Richard Haass, head of the Council on Foreign Relations, said Washington is negotiating from strength, is not negotiating from strength, and that this is prior to yesterday's talks, and that Iran has emerged from the war with greater leverage. On Hormuz, he suggests Washington should tell Iran that the Strait of Hormuz can be open to all or closed to all. So you see that nearly identical phrase Trump just used. Proposes an international governing commission, including Iran and Gulf states, to oversee transit through the Hormuz. Open to tolls and revenue sharing as part of the framework. Crucially, Haass says that if Iran refuses, the U.S. should consider blockading Hormuz. Literally straight from his comments here, you see. So Trump apparently absolutely listened to that. His view: Washington should not accept Iran's sole control over Hormuz, but also realistically cannot exclude Iran from the strait. Haass says that the war has made a return to the pre-war status quo impossible, and the U.S. has lost the war in a strategic and political sense. One wonders if President Trump is listening to that one as well. So we can imagine when the markets open up tomorrow, they're going to be in a panic, because now that you're taking all the oil off. He says nothing in or out. And listen, one of the things I've been saying over and over, that the pressure on the United States to get this over with is because the price of oil, but also on the urea, helium, aluminum, all kinds of other things that are supposed to be coming out too, which has direct impact on what happens in Asia, in Africa, and in Europe. It drives the price up everywhere. And that's why I said he's under the gun, that ticking clock, so to speak, that he has to get something negotiated to get this thing over with and get the flow back opening in by whatever it means. And I had mentioned before that my concern was that he would not do what is diplomatically necessary that would allow in any way, shape, or form Iran to come out with a victory, or even the perception of a victory. But then he also couldn't go the other direction. He couldn't say, well, then forget it. We'll just amp it up a little bit and we'll go back in with more bombs, more missiles. I don't know, a naval blockade. And that somehow that's going to force Iran, then nothing else did. But it's not going to. Iran has certainly foreseen this. I can't imagine that they would be shocked by this. I'm sure they don't like it. They definitely won't like it, because now then the revenue that they were getting is now going to be severed. But that's something that they probably foresaw, and I have no doubt have the ability to say, this is really a game of chicken right now. Because the question is going to be, who can take this stress and this pressure more? There will no doubt be a lot more stress and pressure on the Iranians. No question about it. Because the question is, what happens if it doesn't work? What happens if your effort to bring more military power does not force capitulation? Now then you have added to the pressure that's going to make that oil price go up. Now you have stopped anything, even the trickle that was going 6 to 10, I think, ships per day coming through instead of the normal 100, 130. So that is going to cause even more problems. And if Iran just says, okay, bring it on, then what's he going to do? What if he comes in with a lot more firepower? He says, well, we're going to bring even more missiles and more bombs, and we're going to blow up even more ships. What is that going to? What if that doesn't open it up? Because it's a political decision now, more than a military one, for the Iranian side to keep that strait closed. As I've told you, they've got a half a dozen different ways they can keep it closed. Just mines. That's only one of them. Not even the most effective, in my view. There's plenty of things that they can do, and if they have said that they're willing to suffer and to pay whatever price, there's a pretty good chance that they can outlast Trump. They can probably go months. And I mean, their mentality is used to suffering. They physically have been suffered a lot because of what the West has done, the United States in particular, United States and Israel. They've done this for a long time. It's very unwise to say, let's see who can suffer the longest. That's what we're done here. This game of chicken I'm talking about, this is a test of wills between President Trump and the leadership in Iran. And it's between the peoples of Iran and the peoples of the West, not even just the United States. Who can suffer the most, the longest? Based on track records, I would argue that that's what the Iranian side can do. And listen, this can't be a surprise to anybody. I mean, let's take a look actually how we got here. Because this was President Trump yesterday prior to the start of these negotiations, when he kind of laid out where his mind was.
Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win. We've totally defeated that country. And so let's see what happens. Maybe they make a deal, maybe they don't. From the standpoint of America, we win. One other thing that's happening is that boats are sailing up and heading out to our country. Big, beautiful tankers, and we're loading them up with oil and gas and everything else. And it's a pretty beautiful thing to see.
Solid shit. Appreciate the love, brother.
So, yeah, he said, I wasn't even worried about that. We're going to win no matter what. So that already told you that his idea was basically we're going in telling them, here's the deal, accept this deal, or we're going to kill you. I mean, that's been the modus operandi for a long time, but certainly in this term with President Trump. And he's been used to getting his way, and it's largely succeeded. But now that's run up into an immovable object, and he doesn't seem to have the wherewithal, the brain cells, the cognitive ability, I don't know, you name it, to have anyone say no to him. And so you see this near tantrum today. Oh, yeah? You don't want to do what I say? How about this? How about a blockade? How about we'll blow up any ships on the open water? All this designed to put pressure on the Iranians. But you're seeing that the Iranian side, listen, they're not. This is the deputy speaker of the Iranian parliament, the deputy to Ghalibaf, who we'll see in just a second. And so interesting on the bottom, you see on the bottom bullet there, he's second to bottom, he said, despite sanctions, Iran's oil exports have surpassed 1.6 million barrels today, and the country's oil is practically sanctions proof. Well, that may have been one of the things that may push President Trump over the top. You saw Richard Haas's comments that gave him the idea, but maybe when he saw this, he says, oh, you think you're sanctions proof? How about this? I'll just shut all of it off. Now you get 0.0 barrels per day. But then the last point there, he said the Iranian nation will not retreat even an inch from its demands. They did not. They're not fools. They're not stupid, and they know that if you are boastful in front of President Trump, that he's going to capitulate. So they certainly didn't expect that. And one imagines that they actually expected him to do something like he's doing, but certainly not to surrender to it. You have Ghalibaf himself, who says that this delegates raised a forward-looking initiative during a ceasefire negotiations in Pakistan, but the United States failed to gain the trust of the delegation in the talks. So he's saying, listen, this is you have to come to our terms here. You have to rise up and do something. You have to earn our trust. And when we get it, then we'll consider something else. They knew what a petulant President Trump would do. So there's no doubt that they expected something like this. They have to have. And so then we're getting into it's the test of wills. And then Vice President Vance, when he went to these talks, when he came out of them, there's long talks, 21 hours or so of it. But in his comments afterward, I think that he again revealed that this was never about a negotiation. This was about a requirement on the Iranian side for surrender.
We just could not get to a situation where the Iranians were willing to accept our terms. I think that we were quite flexible. We were quite accommodating. The president told us, you need to come here in good faith and make your best effort to get a deal. We did that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway. Preston.
Mr. Vice President, how often did you communicate with President Trump throughout the negotiations? There were reports that there were multiple rounds where there were breaks in between negotiations. How often did you communicate with the president throughout those rounds, and what was he saying as you were going through these negotiations that you said fell short?
Yeah, obviously we were talking to the president consistently. I don't know how many times we talked to him, a half dozen times, a dozen times over the past 21 hours. We obviously also talked to Admiral Cooper, to Pete, to Marco, to the entire national security team. We talked to Scott Bessent a number of times. So look, we were constantly in communication with the team because we were negotiating in good faith. And we leave here with a very simple proposal, a method of understanding that is our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it.
Okay, that's not diplomacy. We left here with our final and best offer. I mean, it took years to negotiate an end to the Vietnam War. It took a year and a half to negotiate an end to the Korean War. And you come in here in one day, one 21-hour day, and you say we want to negotiate in good faith? That's not negotiating. That is saying, here's my terms, accept it, or we're going to kill you. And now they said, no, we're not going to accept that. And so now President Trump has said, we're going to kill you. We're going to come in with our military. We're going to start, hammering again. As soon as he gets all the ammunition resupplied, like has been in the process ever since this ceasefire began. And now he's added that we're going to attack ships on the open sea, and we're going to attack anybody who tries to stop us. We're going to start demanding. That is a huge mistake. I hope he doesn't do it. I hope that's just bluster. Hopefully the leaders in the Navy will say, no, Mr. President, you send our ships in there to start demanding without the concurrence or the acquiescence of the Iranian side. You're going to get our ships sunk. You're going to get them attacked. You're not going to clear the mine. You may have them. You may result in the Iranian side putting more mines in there, because if you shut it off and say nobody's coming in, they may say, fair enough, nobody's coming in or out now. And then now it's going to be a panic in the Gulf, because already I showed you that chart yesterday, I think, that there's huge amounts of oil that's been already stopped by the Gulf nations. So that means that their income has been radically cut, and they're struggling mightily. They also need imports coming in because they need all kinds of things for food, other kind of goods and requirements for their survival as a nation. They depend upon that traffic coming in as much as we depend on the traffic coming out. Now, President Trump has stopped all of it. Now, where is this going to go? In the near term, I mean, you have the Iranian side is saying, yeah, they're ready to go. Apparently, they were prepared before this, and now it says, yep, now that the talks have apparently collapsed, they're ready to go. But they're not the only ones. Now there's continued additional information here that U.S. intelligence shows that China is taking a more active role in the Iran war, apparently including shoulder-fired missiles. China is secretly taking an active stance in the war, allowing some companies to use chemicals, fuel, and components that can be used in dual purpose for war. What do you think they're going to do if you start attacking China, if you start attacking their ships on the open waters that are bringing goods or oil to them? Probably not going to go very well. So this could be escalated in nearly any way you want to look at it. This is the worst thing that the U.S. could have done. It can't be surprising to anybody, but this is not going to end well. Let me just categorically state, this will not cause the Iranian side to capitulate. They're just not going to do it. It's not in their DNA, and they almost certainly foresaw this. It may have even been their plan to goad President Trump into doing something that would escalate this, because I think they know that militarily we can't suffer more than they can. That's the problem. Well, we're going to find out. Well, listen, we appreciate you guys on a Sunday morning here, but I didn't want to let you go without at least giving you an update on this breaking news here. We're going to continue to follow it, the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Anything further, you can count on us to bring it to you. Till then, we'll see you at the next time.
Donald Trump is panicking as the full consequences of his failed negotiations with Iran and Islamabad, Pakistan, are setting in. As you are now aware, the Trump regime negotiators, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, at Donald Trump's orders, tried to change the pre-approved negotiating framework that was based on a 10-point plan that Iran made Donald Trump agree to before a ceasefire was announced. Donald Trump agreed to the 10-point plan, but then the Trump regime tried to bully and dictate the settlement terms at the Islamabad talks. Iran refused to accept those terms because Iran said we agreed on the 10-point plan. The negotiations fell apart after about 20 hours of purported negotiations. And now Donald Trump is posting that he will be doing a full United States naval blockade of the Persian Gulf, which he says he will block all tankers from every country from going into the Persian Gulf in order to bring back crude oil to their country. So Donald Trump's plan to open up the Strait of Hormuz is to further block the Strait of Hormuz right now by doing a blockade, because as you may be aware, Iran is conducting bilateral discussions with countries across the world to allow allies or even neutral countries to use the Strait of Hormuz at a cost of about $2 million per tanker. And some countries that are allied with Iran don't have to pay that fee. So, for example, China and Russia, they have access to the Strait of Hormuz. India, France, numerous other countries, Pakistan, other countries have been able to utilize the Strait of Hormuz by negotiating specific deals with Iran. And now Donald Trump saying any of those ships, we will interdict, or we will what? We're going to attack those ships, because the United States will be doing a full naval blockade of the Persian Gulf. Donald Trump posted the following message. So there you have it. The meeting went well. Most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not effective immediately. The United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. At some point, we will reach an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out basis.
The reason it's not going to work because Spain done already said they doing all business with Iran. They part of NATO. So Trump going to stop the Spanish ships with oil in it. France done talk deals with Iran. So Trump going to stop the French ships with oil in it? I doubt it.
But Iran has not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about but them. This is world extortion, and leaders of countries, especially the United States, will never be extorted. The Trump regime says that as they were imposing extortionate terms on Iran after agreeing to Iran's 10-point negotiating framework, and the bad faith that was exhibited in Islamabad by the United States and Donald Trump is similar to what has happened before in late February and then back in June in negotiations with Iran.
This is how easy it is to buy shares of properties on RealBricks. You can scroll down to a property that you're interested in. You can click the Buy Now button. Then from here, you have to enter your.
Donald Trump then posted another message that Iran promised to open the Strait of Hormuz. They knowingly failed to do so. This is causing anxiety, dislocation, and pain to many people and countries throughout the world. They say they put mines in the water, even though all of their Navy and most of their mine droppers have been completely blown up. They may have done so, but what ship owner would want to take the chance? There is great dishonor and permanent harm to the reputation of Iran. And then he goes on and just kind of rants and raves like a lunatic. And it's all projection. There's great dishonor right now to the reputation of the United States, and other countries are now having bilateral discussions with Iran. And what Donald Trump is, in essence, threatening a World War III, if you will, if you don't believe we're in one already. I mean, there was clearly a war involving the entire world. I don't want to get hyperbolic here, right? But there was a war involving pretty much all countries in the world. And now Donald Trump is saying the United States is going to impose a full naval blockade of the Persian Gulf to not allow Iran to do any types of deals with other countries, whether that country's France or the European Union or India or China. I mean, what's going to happen if a Chinese vessel shows up to enter the Strait of Hormuz? The naval blockade's going to attack the Chinese ships or the Russian ships or the Indian ships. Is that what the plan is? You have Iranian social media mocking this blockade concept. This is what they said. The new move from Trump against our country is so comical that we don't even have a meme for it, or we can't even find a meme for it. There's mocking Donald Trump and how pathetic he looks. Donald Trump then called into state regime media, which calls itself Fox, Maria Bartiromo, who was the host of the show that he called into. I mean, she was looking at him, frankly, like he was somebody who was like really suffering, almost in like hospice care. And she was looking at him like, oh my God, this guy is really like just totally lost it. And she says, is this going to be enough? The blockade? Is this going to be enough? Listen to what Donald Trump says. Here, play this clip.
I got it ended because of tariffs,
Mr.
which
President,
the Supreme Court was not nice to me about.
is this all going to be enough? The blockade in the strait, the opening up capacity in the United States is this going to be enough to lower the price of oil and gas, sir?
Well, it's going to be eventually. It's going to be lowered. No, it might not happen initially, but it's going to go down. When this is all over, look, The stock market, the Dow hit 50,000. It was supposed to be in 4 or 5 years. They said it won't happen during his term, but it'll be maybe 4 or 5 years. It hit 50,000 in my first year. You know it better than anybody. You cover it better than anybody. The S&P hit.
Then she asks him, so do you believe that the price of oil and gas will be lower before the midterms? Listen to what he says here. Play this clip.
So do you believe the price of oil and gas will be lower before the midterm elections?
I hope so. I mean, I think so. It could be. It could be or the same or maybe a little bit higher, but it should be around the same. I think this won't be that much longer. They're wiped out, man. They're wiped out. And you don't get a fair shake. You don't get, we need a free and fair press in this country. And I don't even know why people would do that. Why would they say how wonderful they're doing militarily? They're doing so well. They're totally, the country is wiped out.
And then he said that I was thinking about calling it the Gulf of Trump. My new plan, maybe I'll call the Persian Gulf the Gulf of Trump. I mean, this is what he's saying right now as he's threatened a naval blockade. And by the way, senior officials say the blockade, they claim that the blockade is going to be taking place and that Navy sending its assets and CENTCOM will be sending assets to blockade it. But Trump's talking about also changing the name to the Gulf of Trump. Let's play this clip.
I tell you, I was thinking about calling it the Gulf of Trump, and I decided not to do it. I think maybe it was a wise. I think that one maybe wouldn't have worked out. I'm not so sure. You'll have to tell me. But I was thinking about it's going to be called the Gulf of Trump. And then I said, that's not going to play too well.
I think you're.
I'm kidding.
You're being facetious. I know that, Mr. President. But what about oil exporters?
So while Donald Trump has these kind of grandiose, views of and unlawful views, let's be very clear, war criminal views, let's be even clearer, of changing the name of the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Trump, we're now actually seeing video of what went down when Iran stopped 2 United States Navy destroyers yesterday while the negotiations were taking place in Islamabad, Pakistan, with Iran. Remember, the Trump regime sent 2 Navy destroyers into the Persian Gulf, and they were going to try to send it through the Strait of Hormuz. And then CENTCOM posted, we just did a successful mission. Our Navy destroyers went east and west through the Strait of Hormuz, and we were clearing all of the mines. And remember how we reported on the Midas Touch Network, and Bloomberg reported, and the Wall Street Journal reported. That didn't happen. What actually happened was quite embarrassing for the United States. I mean, yet another humiliation ritual. We sent our Navy destroyers to the Strait of Hormuz. The Iran Navy stopped it and said, we will fire upon you if you don't turn around. And the once very powerful United States Navy just turned itself around and did not go through the Strait of Hormuz, did not run any missions. Yet CENTCOM, which once was CENTCOM, I mean, it had a ton of credibility, just lied and said that it's a successful mission. Well, now there's video of what went down. Iranian television released footage from yesterday in the Strait of Hormuz, where the naval forces, which, yes, they still exist despite Donald Trump claiming they don't, the naval forces of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard warned a U.S. warship, stay away from the strait or we will be shooting and blowing you up. And then the U.S. ship turns around and goes the other way. And yes, Donald Trump and CENTCOM lied about what happened. As we told you, they were. Play this clip.
Navy warship 121. This is Sepa Navy station. You must alter course and go back to the Indian Ocean immediately. If you don't obey my order, you will be targeted. Out.
This is Coalition Warship 121. Engage in transit passage in accordance with international law. No challenge is attended to you.
U.S. Navy warship transiting in the vicinity of Fojay Report and Oman Sea. This is Sepah Navy. This is Sepah Navy. Last warning, last warning, last warning.
Close to High Island 4.
Attention all vessels, attention all vessels, attention all vessels in Oman Sea. This is Iranian Sepah Navy. If you see any warship in your vicinity, keep a distance more than 10 miles from them because I'm ready to open fire on them without any warning.
You also have Iranian social media continuing to mock the Trump regime. Their social media accounts are posting things like this. Every Gulf has a name, like the Gulf of Mexico and, of course, the Persian Gulf. Before Islamabad, we made clear, zero trust. We are ready for whatever comes next. And they show this photo, and it's Donald Trump with the shadow of Netanyahu in the Oval Office. True peace requires confronting these shadows governing the White House. By the way, while the critical negotiations were taking place regarding the ceasefire in Islamabad, Pakistan, when Trump sent Witkoff and J.D. Vance and J.D. Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner to negotiate with the Iranians. What was Donald Trump doing? You know, Donald Trump was at the UFC fight. I did a video this morning which showed that Dana White had to hold Donald Trump's hand because Trump's physically and mentally deteriorating so quickly. But then Donald Trump went up to one of the UFC fighters during the fight and said how handsome he was. Like Trump was like hitting on the UFC fighter. I just want you to try to wrap your head around this, right? While the United States was in this critical negotiation and Trump sent these negotiators to act in bad faith in Islamabad, Pakistan, Trump was at a UFC fight, like hitting on, like, does he want to like date the fighters? Like, you're so handsome, you're so good looking, oh, you're so strong and muscular. Here, play this clip.
Thank you. What you're doing. You're a beautiful guy. Great fighter. Thanks. Put me tomorrow, then you'll win this fight. I'll give you a honor. You look so good. You're too good looking to be a fighter. You are a sub fighter. Thank you, man. Thank you, sub. Thank you.
I just had to show that to you because what is happening with our country? What has happened to? I mean, this is absolute madness. And again, I don't care what political party you're with. This is madness. Okay, going back to Donald Trump's call to Maria Bartiromo, more talk about bombing Iran to the Stone Age. Let's play this clip.
Well, but in one half of a day, they wouldn't have one bridge standing. They wouldn't have one electric generating plant standing, and they're back in the Stone Ages. I'd rather not do that, but I do believe they're going to come to the table on this because nobody can be so stupid as to say that we want to have nuclear weapons and they have no cards. They have no cards whatsoever.
So if they do not give up that effort, is that the plan? Will you further destruct Iran?
Yeah, I will. If they don't give that plan up, yeah. I'm not in huge hurry. What we want to do is we'll open up the strait. But the ships are coming up to the United States.
Let's talk about that.
I've been inviting everybody. It's pretty good.
Let's talk about that, Mr. President.
By the way, I just find the coverage right now of what's taking place in Islamabad, Pakistan, the war coverage in general, I mean, by corporate media is just so bad. And it's been such an honor here at the Midas Touch Network to be able to report the truth of what's really happening and keeping you multiple steps ahead of everything. So you knew about the 10-point negotiating framework weeks ago, right? That wasn't a shock to you. That's how we have to follow the truth every single day, by bringing the receipts. I just found this so interesting right here. You know, you have, this is the headline. You ready? Trump says empty tankers heading to the U.S. to load up with oil and gas, right? And Trump is saying that to one, he is clearly unfamiliar with the way oil markets work. And also he's trying to tell whatever remaining base he has that it's all good. Everyone's going to get their oil from the U.S., so we don't need the Strait of Hormuz, is basically the point that Donald Trump is making. And so if you just look at the distribution of coverage here, like right-wing media was all over this, and they were reporting, everybody, it's all good. Trump says the empty tankers are heading to the U.S. to load up with oil and gas. Okay, but the way oil works, there's an international market, there's WTI and Brent crude, and what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz impacts prices across the world. And so this is just, you know, more propaganda being fed to kind of the right-wing base to distract them from what's really happening and the dire consequences that are unfolding. And I just think sorting through a lot of this coverage that's out there, it can just be a nightmare sometime, because depending on the outlets you're getting your information from, it's just an utter mess. You get different versions of events. All I want is the truth. And that's exactly why I partner with Ground News for this episode. And frankly, I use their news function for all of my episodes because they're the best tool for me to stay objective with my reporting. Ground News reporting right here, Iran's parliament leader, MB Ghalibaf, recently posted the following message. Before the negotiations with the United States, I emphasized that we have the necessary good faith and will, but due to the experiences of 2 previous wars, we have no trust in the opposing side. My colleagues on the Iranian delegation, which was called the Manab 168, it was named after the elementary school that the Trump regime bombed and killed over 165 little girls, raised forward-looking initiatives. But the opposing side, the United States, ultimately failed to gain the trust of the Iranian delegation in this round of negotiations. America has understood our logic and principles, and now it's time for it to decide whether it can earn our trust or not. We consider every mirror to be another method of authority diplomacy alongside military struggle for upholding the rights of the Iranian nation, and we will not for a moment cease our efforts to consolidate the achievements of the 40 days of Iran's national defense. I'm also grateful for the efforts of our friendly, brotherly country, Pakistan, in facilitating the process of these negotiations, and I send my regards to the people of Pakistan. Iran is a body with 90 million souls. From all the heroic people of Iran who, following the advice of the supreme leader and by taking to the streets, supported their children and sent us on our way with their blessings. For this, I am grateful. And to my colleagues in these intense 21-hour negotiations, I say, well done. God strengthen you. Long live and enduring be our dear Iran. So that's the message coming out of Iran right now. Contrast that to what Donald Trump continues to say. We're putting on a complete blockade, a complete blockade. Here, play this clip.
Tell us what you're trying to accomplish with this blockade,
all in,
sir.
All out. Yep. It's called all in and all out. There'll be a time when we'll have them all come in and all come out, but it won't be a percentage. It won't be a friend of yours, like a country that's your ally or a country that's your friend. It's all or nothing. And that'll be, that won't be in too long a distance. No, we're just bringing the ships up. We got a lot of ships, so we're bringing them up. We think that numerous countries are going to be helping us with this also, but we're putting on a complete blockade. We're not going to let Iran make money on selling oil to people that they like and not people that they don't like or whatever it is. It's going to be all or none, and that's the way it is. And it'll be, you saw what we did with Venezuela. It'll be something very similar to that, but at a higher level.
And Mr. President, you say that there may be a...
Or Donald Trump saying, I'm going to wipe out Iran in one day. Let's play it.
I could take out Iran in one day. I could take out in 1 hour. I could have their entire energy, everything, every one of their plants, their electric generating plants, which is a big deal. And I hate to do it because if I do it, it takes you 10 years to rebuild. They'll never be able to rebuild it. And the other thing you take out are the bridges. I took out one just to show them because they went public with a statement that wasn't true. They admitted it. I say, I'm going to take out a bridge. And I took out a bridge. And that was the end of that. Now they've been really behaving quite well. But in 1/2 of a day, they wouldn't have one bridge standing. They wouldn't have one electric generating plant standing. And they're back in the Stone Ages.
Or Donald Trump saying, yeah, I'm good with destroying the whole civilization of Iran. This is what he said this morning. Let's play it.
Mr. President, you were criticized for this tweet because you said a whole civilization will die tonight. What do you want to say about that? And what can you tell us about next steps here? Are you planning further destruction?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. That statement brought them to the table, with the exception of the one thing, which I believe that they're going to give up on. I believe they're going to give up on that pretty soon, to be honest, because it's not going to work. We actually thought we had them, and then all of a sudden they said, no, we want. So,
And then Donald Trump referred to the F-15E pilots who were purportedly recovered by the United States. Although I think this entire story raises lots of question marks. Who are these F-15E pilots? Why were there 100 special forces involved? Why do we lose 2 C-130s, multiple helicopters, multiple MQ-9 Reaper drones? Why was it right next to the Isfahan facility? Why did we build an entire airstrip over there? Lots of questions. I mean, was this a failed mission to extract uranium from the Isfahan facility? And the F-15E pilot story was pretext and subterfuge and cover up for that. But Donald Trump now says, we captured the pilots, referring to our own pilots as capturing our own pilots. Anyway, here, let's play this clip right
Two ways to trade with Kraken. Whether you're buying crypto instantly on the go or executing precision.
Here.
You don't get a fair shake. You don't get, we need a free and fair press in this country. And I don't even know why people would do that. Why would they say how wonderful they're doing militarily? They're doing so well. The country is wiped out. We lost one airplane and we captured the two pilots. How about we saved those two pilots?
Unbelievable.
Which no other country has the capability.
It's very bizarre phrasing. Also, everybody should pay attention right now to the strait that's in the Red Sea, right? We've been talking about the Strait of Hormuz. Focus on the strait in the Red Sea, because if this blockade is a real thing that Donald Trump is going to do, by the way, which is going to send crude prices, I think, above $115, $120 a barrel in no time, Iran's next logical move is activate the Houthis to basically shut down the Red Sea, and then that'll take the $115 per barrel up to $150 per barrel, and as this crisis escalates. This guy by the name of Danny Citronitz, he was a intelligence officer, by the way, from Israel, regarding Iran and regarding the Middle East. He's actually had spot-on analysis about the folly and the damage and danger and fatal errors being made by the Trump regime in Iran. And here's what he basically notes about all of this. The escalation now appears increasingly unavoidable, especially as Trump significantly raises the stakes with the blockade. Iran is unlikely to back down. It will likely test U.S. resolve by targeting American naval assets, while also attempting to disrupt commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz or deter tankers from transiting altogether. Such developments almost certainly trigger a sharp spike in global oil prices, with cascading second and third order effects, particularly across Asian economies that rely heavily on Gulf energy flows. At the same time, Iran will aim to project resilience and avoid appearing to capitulate under pressure. Further escalation would increase the likelihood of Houthi action in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea, potentially threatening another critical maritime choke point. It would also raise the risk of Iranian strikes against infrastructure designed to bypass Hormuz, including pipelines such as the East-West Corridor. While Iran would sustain significant damage, it will attempt to maintain oil exports through alternative routes like the Jask terminal, calculating the Gulf states may ultimately suffer greater economic harm. In any case, this is not a scenario with a clear winner, only varying degrees of losers. Although I would argue that Iran, China, and Russia are winners in all of this. China being the biggest, Russia being the second, the U.S. and NATO being the big losers in all of this. We'll keep you posted every step of the way, but that's what's happening this morning. Hit subscribe. Let's get to
Something seismic just shifted beneath the surface of the so-called fragile ceasefire in the Middle East. And for all the saber rattling from Washington and the hollow boasts of victory emanating from Tel Aviv, the Pentagon is waking up to a nightmare they can't spin their way out of. U.S. intelligence assessments, splashed across the global media circuit just this weekend, reveal that Beijing is moving swiftly to plug the gaps in Tehran's air defenses with a massive influx of new hardware.
China quietly stepping into the Iran conflict? A new report suggests Beijing is preparing to send air defense weapons to Tehran.
Well, U.S. intelligence data is now showing that China is preparing to send weapons to the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is amid
U.S. intelligence indicates that China may be preparing to supply new air defense systems to Iran within weeks,
effectively rendering the vaunted American and Israeli air superiority over Iran a relic of the past 5 weeks. We're not talking about spare parts or window dressing. We are talking about a systematic, strategic, and absolute pivot by the world's largest manufacturing superpower to transform the Islamic Republic into a no-fly zone for F-35s and F-15s. The reports which the White House is desperately trying to downplay as they scramble to manage the optics of J.D. Vance and Jared Kushner's high-stakes trip to Islamabad, confirm what many of us already knew. China is not just a neutral mediator. Beijing is the shadow architect of Iran's resilience. They are flooding the country with everything from shoulder-launched Manpads that turn the low-flying sorties into suicide runs, to the technological backbone of satellite-killing navigation and radar-evading drone swarms. The sheer audacity of it, offering this military umbrella in exchange for nudging Iran toward the negotiating table in Pakistan, has exposed the utter hollowness of American leverage in West Asia. While the United States Navy bobs nervously in the Gulf, terrified of the cheap drones and anti-ship missiles that have already driven oil prices into chaos, China is rewriting the rules of engagement with dry cargo vessels, third country transshipments, and a level of strategic depth that makes Trump's maximum pressure look like a toddler's tantrum. This is not just about a 2-week ceasefire. This is about the long-term encirclement of American and Zionist ambitions in the energy heartland of the world. And let's be brutally clear about what is unfolding. While the corporate media parrots the U.S. State Department line about a fragile truce, the Iranians are using this pause not to capitulate, but to rearm with Chinese weapons that are leagues ahead of anything they've ever had. We've seen the wreckage of the U.S. F-15E and the A-10 over Iranian soil. We've tracked the stunning forced landing of an F-35, the billion-dollar symbol of American hubris, after being hit by a cheap Iranian electro-optical system. That was before this new tranche of Chinese air defense arrived. Now, the United States Air Force, for all its bluster, is effectively grounded in Iranian airspace without incurring catastrophic losses that even the American public won't stomach. China's move is a masterstroke of realpolitik. They are securing the flow of the world's energy supply, because nearly 20% of global crude transits through the choke point of Hormuz. And they are doing it by arming the one nation with the guts to stand up to the American-Israeli war machine. Forget the cozy photos of Trump and Xi. That's theater for the stock markets. On the ground, Beijing has chosen a side, and it's the side of the resistance against empire. They are not just selling weapons. They are stress testing their own military-industrial complex in the crucible of real combat against the most advanced Western air forces on the planet. It's a laboratory of war where Iranian courage meets Chinese silicon, and the results are already proving catastrophic for the Zionist regime and their handlers in Washington. Now, before we dive into the intricate web of this alliance and the military fortress that Pakistan has become, I need you to do something crucial. If you value honest journalism that isn't filtered through the lens of NATO propaganda or the Israeli lobby, hit that like button and share this video. It's the only way we can overpower the algorithm that buries real news about this resistance. Drop a comment below, even if it's just a dot, or better yet, tell me what you think Beijing's next move will be. And if you haven't already, subscribe to support this channel. We are your front line in the information war against the empire's narrative. Now, let's get into exactly how China turned the tables. To understand the sheer genius of Beijing's current maneuver, you have to look at the venue of these so-called peace talks. It's no accident that this high-wire act of diplomacy is happening in Islamabad, Pakistan. This isn't just some neutral ground. This is China's backyard. Pakistan is what the Chinese affectionately and strategically call their iron brother. For decades, Beijing has meticulously turned Pakistan into an unassailable military fortress, a buffer state designed to check the ambitions of both India and, more importantly in this context, Israel. Through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and decades of joint military development, China has turned Pakistan's air force into a force multiplier. Just days ago, on the eve of these talks, Pakistani F-16s and the entirely Chinese-made JF-17 Thunder Block 3 fighters, flown by Pakistani pilots but equipped with China's most lethal PL-15E beyond visual range missiles, were seen scrambling into Iranian airspace near Bandar Abbas. Their mission was explicit: to provide a top-tier aerial escort for the Iranian delegation's aircraft, daring any Israeli F-35 lurking in the shadows to make a move. It was a direct, unmistakable message. The skies over Iran are no longer a free fire zone for the U.S.-Israeli coalition. If you touch the Iranian bird, you face the full wrath of Pakistan's Chinese-built arsenal. This is the template. If Beijing can turn Pakistan's airspace into a death trap for Indian or Israeli ambitions, what do you think they are capable of doing with Iran's vast and mountainous terrain.
If you're not making $158,000 per year, but you'd like to, I strongly...
The playbook is already written, and the ink is Chinese red. The cargo flights and the shadowy fleet of dark vessels aren't carrying toys. They are carrying the instruments of a new regional order. We're talking about the deployment of advanced HQ-9B long-range air defense batteries and JY-14 counter-stealth radars, systems that are specifically designed to track and kill the F-35 and F-22. The Americans have spent 2 decades telling the world that stealth makes them gods of the sky, but over the Persian Gulf, that mythology has been shattered. An Iranian Majid system, a system that costs less than the fuel in a US fighter tank, already forced an F-35 down. Now imagine that same Iranian network with the full neural network of China's Beidou satellite navigation, feeding it real-time targeting data. China's own ambassador has all but confirmed that Iran is leveraging Beidou's encrypted military-grade signals to guide its missiles and track US naval assets. This isn't just an upgrade. It's a complete obliteration of the US technological edge. The Pentagon can scream air superiority all they want, but when you've lost 2 aircraft in a single day and are forced to rely solely on expensive standoff missiles fired from 100 miles away because the close-in threat is too lethal, you have ceded the airspace. Beijing is sending Manpads to make the low-altitude environment unbreathable for American A-10s and helicopters, and they are sending the radar and satellite architecture to make high-altitude stealth missions suicidal. They are closing the sky, layer by layer. And let's not be naive about the economics of this. Why is Beijing so aggressively willing to risk a trade war with Trump to arm Iran? Look at the numbers spelled out plainly. As much as 90% of Iran's crude exports flow directly to China. We're talking about roughly 1.4 million barrels per day that keep the giant factories of Shenzhen humming and the lights on in Shanghai. For the first time in years, Chinese independent refiners, the so-called teapots, are actually paying a premium between $1.50 and $2 a barrel over Brent crude to secure Iranian oil. This is because the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has sent global energy prices into a frenzy. China's economy, despite its size, is projecting growth of just 4.5 to 5% this year, the lowest in decades. A prolonged war in Iran that strangles the flow of oil is an existential threat to Beijing's bottom line. But a protected, independent, and well-armed Iran is a guarantor of China's energy security. It's a very simple equation. A prostrate Iran under US-Israeli occupation means China pays whatever price Washington dictates. A victorious, resilient Iran, backed by Chinese air defense and Chinese satellite intelligence, means Beijing dictates the terms of global energy flow. The Chinese leadership understands that manufacturing power is worthless without the raw crude to power the assembly lines. They are not just defending Iran, they are defending the very bloodstream of their own superpower status. But the weapons going into Iran right now are far more insidious and dangerous to a potential ground invasion than anyone in Tel Aviv or Washington is willing to admit publicly. The mainstream narrative likes to focus on the big sexy systems like the J-10C or the rumored J-20, but the real nightmare for any U.S. ground commander is the flood of cheap, lethal, and decentralized Chinese technology hitting the Iranian military's tactical units. We're talking about FPV drones, first-person view kamikaze drones, being assembled not in some central factory that can be bombed, but in the basements of Tehran apartment blocks using components shipped from Shenzhen. These fiber optic guided munitions are essentially unjammable. They turn a $20,000 drone into a tool that can destroy a multi-million-dollar Merkava tank or a Bradley fighting vehicle. Reports indicate that Iran's production capacity for these FPVs could soar past 100,000 units per month. This is the war of exhaustion that U.S. military strategists have feared for years. We haven't even touched on the anti-tank mines and advanced shoulder-fired missiles. These are the weapons that neutralize the 2 things the American military relies on: overwhelming air support and armored blitzkrieg. By saturating Iran with these Chinese platforms, Beijing is ensuring that any talk of a boots-on-the-ground invasion is a fantasy that ends with a river of American body bags. It's a fair game, as you said. The Chinese manufacturers get the ultimate combat data to refine their products, seeing how their guidance systems hold up against U.S. electronic warfare, how their motors perform in the Persian Gulf heat, and the Iranians get the tools to bleed the occupation forces dry. Furthermore, the support extends to the Iranian Air Force's own aging fleet. While the US media mocks Iran's old F-14 Tomcats and F-4 Phantoms as museum pieces, they ignore the Chinese engineering and parts that keep these birds in the sky and, crucially, keep them lethal. Beijing has been providing the critical avionics upgrades, the radar components, and the logistics that allow these Cold War relics to still pose a credible threat. And moving forward, the real game changer is the potential transfer of Chinese J-10C Vigorous Dragon multi-role fighters. These are not fifth-generation stealth planes, but they don't need to be. Equipped with active electronically scanned array radars and the long-range PL-15 air-to-air missile, a weapon that outranges even the US AM-120 AMRAAM, the J-10C acts as a missile truck. Combined with the ground-based radar and satellite network provided by China, an Iranian J-10C doesn't need to see the F-35 with its own eyes. It just needs to launch the missile into the grid coordinates provided by the network and let the PL-15's active seeker do the rest. This is the system of systems approach that the United States used to dominate the world with, and now it is being deployed against them. It is a brutal, sobering reality for the Pentagon. They are no longer fighting a 1991-era Iraqi army. They are fighting a proxy of the world's manufacturing titan. This is the new reality, unfolding in the ancient lands of Persia. While the diplomats sip tea in Islamabad's fortified Serena Hotel, the real power is being projected from the decks of Chinese cargo vessels and the encrypted data links connecting Beijing to Tehran. The United States has been handed a stark and undeniable defeat. The uselessness of their fighter jets is not hyperbole. It is a battlefield fact, confirmed by the wreckage of their aircraft and the desperation of their diplomatic overtures. Watch closely, because the next few weeks will determine whether the empire limps away from this humiliation or foolishly decides to test the full, terrifying might of what China has just unleashed in the heart of the Middle East.
This is what would happen to your body if you ate mood sleep gummies every day. Day 1, you take your first gummy at
talk about sending military weapons in this video. It is said China recently sent military equipment to Iran. These items include electronic systems for national air defense networks. The famous Chinese portable system called FN6 is included. The word Manpads means Man Portable Air Defense System, essentially. This light weapon is designed to destroy flying aerial targets. An infantry soldier can easily place this missile on shoulders. The low weight of this system makes its use comfortable. The manufacturing history of these defense equipments reaches Cold War. The American and Soviet countries built these missiles first time. The main goal was protecting ground forces against fighter jets. Today, the technology of these weapons has become very precise. This defensive system is made of 3 very important parts. The launch tube is the first part holding the missile. The missile stays inside that tube until the firing time. The third part is the battery and missile cooling system. Another important part is the firing grip, or missile handle. This specific handle has the ability to separate from tubes. The soldier keeps the handle again after launching the missile. The firing handle gets prepared to connect to new tubes. The battery has the duty to supply system power beforehand. A cooling gas tank is installed right next to batteries. This gas is very necessary for cooling the missile sensor. The sensor must be completely cool and ready before shooting. The front part of missiles includes a sensitive thermal seeker. This sensor can see the heat of airplane or helicopter. When the sensor cools down, its sensitivity increases very sharply. Finding the target becomes very easy for the missile now. The newer systems use dual guidance technology for tracking targets. They examine both infrared waves and ultraviolet rays simultaneously together. This technology prevents the missile from being deceived by flares. In this way, the success rate of hitting increases significantly. In the first stage, operators must find targets by eyes. Then they should aim the missile towards that specific target. After aiming, the power and gas systems must be activated. This allows the missile sensor to become fully active now. The missile starts searching for heat after being activated completely. When aircraft engine heat is detected, the missile locks on. A continuous beeping sound reaches the ears of the soldier. This means the system is ready to shoot enemies. The soldier presses the launch button after hearing continuous beeps. By pressing the trigger, electronic launch commands are issued immediately. The battery releases its maximum power capacity in this moment. The initial engine of the missile turns on very quickly. The shoulder-launched missiles have a special initial launch motor. This engine only throws the missile out of the tube. It turns off before exiting the tube completely and safely. This prevents the engine fire from burning the soldier's face. After the missile gets 10 meters away from the soldier, the main flight engine turns on with very high power. This engine will increase the missile speed to Mach 2. The high speed takes away the escape opportunity from targets. The flying missile uses its aerodynamic fins during the flight. These small fins adjust the movement path very quickly indeed. The sensor constantly sends target positions to the missile computer. The control system also changes the fin angles permanently too. The missile does not travel a straight path to target. It uses proportional navigation methods for accurate tracking and interception. In this method, the missile calculates future collision points exactly. This smart algorithm increases the probability of hitting fast targets. The warhead of these missiles usually has relatively low weight. The total weight of explosive materials is about 2 kilograms, but these chemical materials are extremely powerful and highly deadly. Many steel shrapnel pieces surround the explosive materials completely now. 2 different types of fuses are used for warhead explosion. The first fuse is contact type and explodes upon impact. The second is proximity fuse, which explodes near the target. If the missile misses slightly, the proximity fuse finishes it. When the explosion occurs, thousands of shrapnel hit aircraft bodies. These flying shrapnel pieces destroy the vital systems of aircraft. The helicopter or fighter engine is the main target here. Damage to the engine causes rapid crash of enemy aircraft. The range of these missiles is 5 to 7 kilometers. They do not have the ability to follow targets further. Their maximum flight ceiling will also reach exactly 4 kilometers. Therefore, aircraft flying at higher altitudes are safe from danger. The military pilots receive special training to escape these missiles. The airplanes try to deceive the missile by dropping flares. A flare is a heat source hotter than airplane engines. If the missile is old, it gets deceived by flares. But modern Chinese systems like FN6 have smart processors. This system understands the difference between engine heat and flares. The missile realizes that the flare moves at slower speeds. Therefore, it ignores the flare and follows the aircraft path. The new combat helicopters are equipped with laser blinding systems. These powerful lasers shine exactly into the missile sensor eyes. By doing this, the missile sensor becomes blind for moments. As a result, the missile loses its target and falls. A special system is installed to prevent hitting friendly targets. This secure technology is called identification of friend or foe. The operator sends an encrypted radio signal before shooting anything. If the airplane is friendly, the system prevents the launch. The foot soldiers can carry this weapon into mountains easily. The total weight of system and missile is 20 kilograms. A 2-person team can easily move several heavy missiles. Hiding with this compact weapon among the trees is easy. The presence of this system in battlefields breaks war rules. Close air support aircraft are forced to stay high above. Flying at high altitudes reduces the bombing accuracy of enemies. In this way, infantry forces are saved from accurate bombings. The Chinese FN-6 system has a very special design. The missile tip has a pyramidal shape for aerodynamic slicing. This special design gives more speed and stability to missiles. Also, the sensor lens has better protection against environmental disturbances. Ultimately, these portable missiles are a deadly threat to helicopters. Combining this weapon with radar systems creates complete air defense. Adding such equipment doubles the defensive power of ground forces. These were all details regarding the performance of Manpads missiles.
The April 15th tax deadline is coming, and your max refund is a few steps away with TurboTax.
All the time now. Scott Ritter, former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer, a former arms inspector with the United Nations, and a man that I have been following for a very long time, as many sensible people are now all over the world. Scott, thanks for joining us at this auspicious moment. Let's start at the beginning, or the restart. Were you surprised at the failure of the talks in Islamabad?
No. I mean, first of all, the talks aren't over. This is a process, and I'm not surprised that the United States came in crudely, rudely, lewdly, ill-prepared, and, pulled a stunt. When you hear about what the Iranians did, how well prepared they were, how they had, technical papers, talking points, they were ready to work with the United States to come up with a solution to every problem. The United States was not. This is typical Donald Trump. Show up, bluster, pound the table, walk away, as if this is a New York State, or New York City real estate deal, and those people are going to be desperately calling you back, trying to, lower the fee. The Iranians aren't playing that game, of course, but even as J.D. Vance left and the senior Iranians left, the both sides left technical teams behind who were working on technical details. So the talks are very much ongoing. And until which time we see missiles flying and bombers flying, the ceasefire will hold. It's a 2-week ceasefire. The ceasefire has not been terminated. And so this is a process. This is theater, the theater of the absurd. It's a very dangerous game because it can spin out of control at any minute. I think Donald Trump, once again, is just, being foolish. He really doesn't have the cards to be playing, this kind of high stakes poker. But, that's who he is. And I think the Iranians know who he is, and they haven't budged. They know where they can go. They know what they want to accomplish. The thing is, the United States has no clue what it wants to accomplish because we haven't even taken the time to get into the details. When the president says he wants a hard commitment from the Iranians not to produce a nuclear bomb, he already has it. He killed the man who put the fatwa on the table. I mean, what an idiot this person is. And the Iranians have not reversed that fatwa. And indeed, had he sent some true experts, not Jared Kushner, not Witkoff, and certainly not J.D. Vance, at least not J.D. Vance unless he's backed up with genuine thinking people, we could have sat down with the Iranians and shut the door on any potential of Iran ever producing a nuclear weapon. This is the easiest deal in the world to make, but we're not there to make that deal. We're here to create the impression that the United States is in charge, that the United States won this war, because this is what it's all about, George. This is about Donald Trump's political legacy. This is about Donald Trump continuing to cement the notion that he's a winner, that everything's the hottest that's ever been. Because if we deal with the actual facts, Donald Trump's one of the biggest losers ever to walk the face of the earth. This is a humiliation that's taken place for the United States. The greatest military power in the world could not bring to their knees the nation of Iran. Now, we all know why that is, and the Iranians have a lot to be proud of. But, you know, you don't walk around claiming to be the best of the best. You can talk the talk, but unless you can walk the walk, you better not talk the talk. And Donald Trump better learn to keep his mouth shut, because what Iran has done to the United States and Israel is to humiliate them badly.
Well, if there was any issue that could have been more easily solved than this issue of the nuclear bomb, it was the Straits of Hormuz, which I keep reminding everyone were never blocked until Donald Trump launched a war which got them blocked. Now we've got a proposal for a blockade of the blockade, which is blockading a strait that was never blockaded before. That really is the theater of the absurd. How's that going to work, Scott?
Well, I don't know if it will work at all, because first of all, a blockade is an act of war. So if you're in the middle of a ceasefire and you decide to commit a blockade, it's the same as launching a bombing raid on Iran. It's an act of war, so it's the end of the ceasefire. Second of all, the last time I checked, there are Chinese and Russian tankers that transit. I don't know if Donald Trump's really ready to have that kind of fight with the Chinese and the Russians right now. Again, this is man whose mouth just goes. They really need to remove him from all ability to access social media. They need to put Sebastian Gorka in jail. They need to put Stephen Miller in jail. They need to get responsible people around him so that when he communicates on policy issues, it's done only after, he has, consulted with experts and they have hammered out a consensus statement. Donald Trump's the worst thing that's happened to American foreign policy, American national security policy, because he gets so far ahead of the game that he's just living in never land. We aren't in a position to launch a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. We would be declaring war on the world. I mean, he does understand that Kuwaiti oil flows through there. United Arab Emirates oil flows. Saudi oil flows through there. Bahraini oil, Qatar. I mean, what kind of brain dead moron is this president to think that simply by saying something it is so? The Iranian Navy, by the way, I want to remind everybody that the Navy is alive and well and living, not only mined certain channels in the Strait of Hormuz after Pete Hegseth said they no longer exist, but the last time I checked, it was the Iranian Navy on the radio with 2 American destroyers telling them that if you don't turn around, we will sink you. This is the Iranian Navy that's destroyed, doesn't exist. They control the Strait of Hormuz. And the other thing is, where is this blockade going to take place? Because you're not going to be bringing your ships close to the strait. You'll lose all your ships that way. So this blockade, is going to retreat into the Indian Ocean, into open seas, international waterways, and you're going to run a blockade there. Good luck, Donald Trump. I mean, at some point in time, even Pete Hegseth has to turn to him and say, Mr. President, you're dumber than dirt.
I wouldn't count on it. But the president who said all this was last night at a UFC fight, MMA fight in Florida, where he was roundly booed, by the way. But with him was your Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Isn't he nominally in charge of foreign affairs?
Nominally. That is the appropriate word, nominally. He is selectively in charge of those things that he has been given permission to get involved in. I mean, this has to be, I'm not a big Marco Rubio fan, but, he is the Secretary of State, so he has a portfolio. But when you're the Secretary of State with the malignant narcissist named Donald Trump, You have no portfolio. All portfolios belong to Donald Trump, and you only get the tidbits that he throws out at you. But in this case, I think Marco Rubio might be grateful that he's at the MMA and not being thrown away to the wolves like J.D. Vance is. It'd be one thing if you sent a negotiator who could actually close the deal. George, I'm here to tell you, I'm not the greatest diplomat that ever walked the face of the earth. I could have closed a deal last night that would have been a win for the United States, an absolute victory for Donald Trump. He could have walked away with the reputation of being a deal maker, a peacemaker, and all that. The Iranians are not impossible to work with. They are looking for a deal. They know what when they say they're red lines, and remember, these red lines are very broad brushed red lines. These aren't, narrow strands of titanium. These are concepts that, there's a lot of maneuver room in there if you actually know what you're doing. But here's the other thing too. Marco Rubio is the head of a department that he himself has gutted. The State Department today is a shadow of its former self. He is a Secretary of State, but he doesn't have the team that we need to be doing this. There used to be a day and age when we had a phone book in the State Department and every phone number had an expert, an honest to God expert on the other end. You could pick them up and get answers. They could form teams. They could form agency working groups, interagency working groups. They could come up with ideas, concepts. That's gone. Right now, all you have is Donald Trump's gut feeling. And I don't want to say too much about his gut, but any feeling that comes out of it isn't something I want to be particularly enamored of.
You don't want to be downwind of it. That is for sure, according to eyewitnesses or nose witnesses these days. But that was really my point, Scott. Wasn't this deliberate suicide mission on which J.D. Vance was sent? When I saw the pictures from the MMA last night in Florida, it looked pretty clear to me that Trump is anointing Rubio and ditching Vance. And thus Vance was sent on a mission that he was designed to fail.
100%. I mean, J.D. Vance made a mistake of, speaking out behind closed doors. He's been a loyal vice president. We have to give him all the credit in the world. Publicly, he's been supportive of this president, but it is clear that J.D. Vance did not support this war. And now it's been clear that J.D. Vance has been shown to have been largely correct. And you can't be correct in Donald Trump's circle. He's not somebody who appreciates you being right, him being wrong. And so what Donald Trump is now doing is destroying the J.D. Vance brand. And it's a shame that America is witnessing, one of the most critical national security moments in modern history. Literally, George, this is what I call an empire terminating event. The consequences of the failure of the United States and Iran go well beyond the Middle East region. They go into Europe, they go into Asia. This is, it has accelerated the collapse of the empire, across the board. And, Donald Trump right now is a man who has sacrificed the reputation of the country for his branding, the Trump branding. And branding is just all about, selling himself as the greatest, the best, the everything. To have J.D. Vance there, it's like having somebody saying, I was right, he was wrong. Nobody's allowed to say that around Donald Trump. Only Donald Trump's allowed to be right. So now Donald Trump is about to make J.D. Vance wrong. He's going to say, J.D. Vance couldn't close the deal, but now I'm going to send somebody in. Like I said, we have 2 weeks. And I do believe there will be a deal because Donald Trump doesn't have any options. I heard one of your callers talk about, we're reloading. What missiles are we reloading? We haven't built them yet. The same deficiency in stocks that we had when the ceasefire began exists today. There's been no change in that reality. Just because we had a couple days where bombs aren't falling doesn't mean that American shipping suddenly has a magic aura thrust about it that makes them invincible to Iranian missiles. We cannot project power into the region. It's over. We lost this war. There's nothing that can happen that changes that calculus. Iran still has its missiles. Moreover, they're reconstituting even more missiles. They're getting stronger, whereas the United States is simply treading water. Donald Trump knows this. If this war resumes, it'll resume with a vengeance that'll punish Israel even harsher and the United States and their Gulf Arab allies even more. The Gulf Arab states are in a panic right now, an absolute panic, because They now know that the United States cannot protect them. And they also know that Donald Trump's words especially can't protect them. And so this next 2 weeks, you're going to see by the end, in my opinion, by the end of this negotiating period, Donald Trump's going to make a deal, but it's going to be a deal that makes Donald Trump the winner, J.D. Vance the loser. I don't think he's going to be promoting little Marco too much. He's just, Marco's just a tool. Everybody needs to understand that Donald Trump will throw everybody under the bus. There is nobody who's safe when it comes to Donald Trump and his ego. He will not allow anybody to outshine him. And so that's where we're at right now. He is desperate to come out of this a winner, moving into the summer political season right before the November midterm elections, trying to win over an American public that has lost lost confidence in this man. This con man can no longer con. And so this is a game that we're playing. I think people spend far too much time looking at the nuances of actual diplomacy without understanding that the only diplomatic maneuvering taking place is within Donald Trump's inner circle as he seeks to cancel those people who have more credibility than him because they actually stood up and opposed the war.
And yet the same man that can't beat Iran didn't and can't threaten China this morning. He said when told that China was resupplying the Iranians with anti-aircraft munitions and so on, he became very animated and said, China's going to be in big trouble if they supply the Iranians. And this with a visit to Beijing, outstanding, the one that he had to cancel the last time he insulted China. There is an air of unreality about him. I'm wondering if you think, like me, that he's really losing his marbles.
I've never been impressed with the intellectual capacity of Donald Trump. I've always given him the benefit of the doubt when it comes to, New York City criminality. I mean, most mafia, made men are somewhat, clever. They understand the streets, but they can't function in real life because in real life, you got to do more than just bully people. You actually have to think your way out of a problem. You have to have actual genuine expertise. Donald Trump has expertise in nothing, zero, squat. And, and so here we have a situation where he has not even bothered to surround himself. It's okay. To be a charismatic leader, to surround yourself with good people and have the, wherewithal to sit back and go, all right, talk to me about this. Okay, thanks. Boom. And then go out there and broad brush, do what the guy just told you to do. But Donald Trump doesn't operate that way. He's all about himself. And so what looks like diminished mental capacity is just the reality that Donald Trump's dumber than dirt. He's not a very bright man. He's a pretty stupid man when it comes to the world we live in. He says the same things over and over again. I don't know how many times I have to hear that he's a good friend of Xi Jinping. He's my good friend. I think Xi Jinping despises Donald Trump. I think Xi Jinping has no use for him, but Donald Trump is the president of the United States. So Xi Jinping has to, give that status some notice. But, when I talk about empire terminating events, something happened earlier this week. I don't think many Americans picked up on it, but the head of the Kuomintang, Taiwan's main opposition party that controls the parliament, flew to China and met with Xi Jinping. And there's talk about Xi Jinping coming to Taiwan. Guys, it's over. Game, set, match. China won. We can't take the Strait or Hormuz. Do you think that, that we can secure the Straits of Malacca in Indonesia? The answer is no. Do you think that we can now compel the Chinese to give up their island bases in the South China Sea? The answer is no. China controls the major sea lines of communication that connect Japan and South Korea and Taiwan with the rest of the world. And the United States has proved that we no longer have the military capacity to keep these sea lanes open. The National Security Strategy of the United States, November last year, said that we are seeking conventional military overmatch with the Chinese so that when we sit down with the Chinese, they pee their pants in fear because we're so much better than they are. And we have lost that. We are now the pathetic, losers of the world. Because if you think the Iranian missiles are good, you haven't seen anything yet. The Chinese have missiles that are specifically designed to take out American aircraft carriers and all this. It's It's over, and Donald Trump can't handle it. This is what happens when a man with diminished mental capacity, zero intellectual capability, is confronted with overwhelmingly difficult problems. He needs to shut up and start bringing in experts who guide him through this process, or otherwise we're going to dig ourselves into such a deep hole. One of your callers called in and talked about, how do we even begin reconstituting some of our more advanced technologies, because the supply chain all goes back to China in rare earth minerals. Gosh, what do they call them? Something magnets. It's a special term for magnets, but the magnets that are used in these weapon systems, these processes. China can just shut us down anytime they want to right now. We hold no cards. The only card we hold is nuclear weapons, and we don't even hold that card anymore.
One last segue then, Scott. I'm in Moscow right now. What does all this mean for the NATO-Russia war? The United States seems to have stopped talking about it. The Europeans are not talking about it nearly as much as they were in the last couple of years, 4 years. The partisanship that you used to see on social media, the symbols, the memes, all of that, the NAFO, you remember them, were always salivating, barking dogs after people like you and me. Is it over, the Ukraine war? And how will it be brought to an end?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of fighting going on. The Ukrainian army is a very big army. That's what people need to understand. And even though we're not actively resupplying it, it has, enough meat on the bones to keep fighting for some time now. But it's like, the American Civil War, Lee versus Grant. The Confederate Army was a good army. They had quality troops. They go into a battle. The Ukrainians aren't beating the Russians, so that's the thing. But the Confederates used to go in and fight the Union to a standstill. But at the end of the day, they had to withdraw, not because they beat the Union, but because they lost too many men. They had to withdraw. And the Union just kept reinforcing. Russia's, not losing that many men. The Ukrainians are getting slaughtered. But the thing is that the Russians are winning each one of these battles. Yes, there's the isolated counterattack here and there, but the Russians are dominating this battle. And this battle, again, one of your callers talked about drone warfare. I will be doing a major project on drone warfare in the coming months, where hopefully I'll be able to answer many of these questions with specifics, firsthand experience. But just doing the research of this project, the war that's being fought on the ground, in Ukraine between the Ukrainians and Russians is unlike any war that's ever been imagined by anybody in NATO. The NATO and the United States, none of them know how to fight this war. They would be slaughtered in an instant by the reality of this war. And this war, as you rightly pointed out, is not one that's conducive to being mastered by, capitalist-driven military industrial complex where money is everything. The drone innovations that are take place on the front lines with the privates, the sergeants, the sub-lieutenants who every day are flying these missions, watching the enemy react and making the adjustments there on the front. They don't have to send it back to Washington, D.C. to get permission. They're doing it right there. The innovation's happening. They capture it while they're fighting. They send the innovation back to be looked at by a panel of people who then seek to adapt that and get it down. The ability of the Russians to respond almost instantaneously to battlefield innovations and advances. The Ukrainians are doing the same thing. This is a fascinating, dangerous war because the moment you achieve drone dominance, the battlefield breaks down in support of the enemy. Everything breaks down. And so it's always this battle between, who can get dominance? Can the other side then return parity, maybe push you back? It's drones that are driving every aspect of this war. And we're not there. We don't know how to do it. We don't understand how to do it. We don't understand how do you break, centuries of, legacy dominance by infantry and armor, and artillery. Those are the big three. And suddenly there's these geeky little drone operators come in and go, yeah, we're sort of the top dogs right now. We're the ones that drive this boat. Everything works for us. Everything's centered around us. The Russians have gone ahead and they've created their own drone branch. And so, now a drone operator is a standalone like the infantry, and it's becoming a dominating aspect of this war. A lot of resources are going into this. In the United States, we're not doing that. NATO's not doing that. It's the end of NATO, George. I mean, the United States isn't just not talking about what's going on with Ukraine. We're talking about pulling out 100,000 troops from Europe. We're talking about selective support for nations. Article 5 is about collective self-defense. But when the United States says, Italy, you didn't send any ships, Spain, you didn't send any ships, Germany, you didn't send any ships, we're not going to support you. It's the end of NATO. It's part of the empire terminating event, all linked back to the American failure in Iran.
As somebody we both know and who's in a position to know, told me that the Ukraine war and the development of drone capacities therein is the most significant development in warfare since the invention of dynamite. Is that hyperbole, or do you recognize that?
No, it's 100%. If you haven't mastered let's put it this way. If you don't have tanks, you can still win on the battlefield. It's nice to have tanks. Tanks provide nice supporting arms. There's a utility for them. But you can still prevail on the battlefield without tanks. If you don't have drones, you will not prevail. You will not win. You will lose. There's no doubt about it. Drones are the single most important weapon system on the battlefield today.
Finally, I know it's not your area of expertise, and neither of us are the kind of fellow who enjoys attacking somebody else's wife. We have adversaries. No need to bring their wife into it. But Melania's looking a bit of a shaky vessel on the Epstein front these days. I wonder if you had any insight on that.
George, I try to stay as far away from that stinking pile of. Look, let's get serious for a second. America has an Epstein problem, and the world has an Epstein problem. What the Epstein files represent is the absolute, not just dysfunction, but rotten to the core. We are talking about America rotting from inside, the power elites and what was being done and what was being tolerated and who was doing it and how it was normalized. I mean, that's the thing about it, is how this was normalized. Even the mafia, when they had a hitman, nobody wanted to hang around the hitman because he was just a bad guy. But here, everybody wants to hang around Epstein. Everybody wants to be with Epstein and Maxine and all this stuff. And they normalized some of the worst criminal behavior imaginable. And that's where Melania is. She normalized a relationship that she's now trying to walk away from, but you can't. And I think Melania and Donald Trump, I mean, I'm not accusing Melania of directly participating in anything, but I can say this: she had to have known what Donald Trump was doing, what Epstein was doing, and she normalized it. She made it appear as if she can have normal interaction with these people, and you can't. But that is part of the rot, and so she brought it on herself. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about this if she hadn't come out and thrust the spotlight on herself. But now that she's opted in to that, we have every obligation now to reflect on this. And it's, I think that she will go down in history as an enabler. Maybe that's not a criminal act, but it's an act that should define her in the eyes of society as one of the worst kinds of human beings. She, was this elite, rich, empowered, entitled person who lived a lifestyle that was built on the backs of these girls who were being sexually exploited by the people she hung out with. And I'm sorry, Melania, you brought it on yourself, but there it is.
Scott Ritter, former Marine Corps intelligence officer and arms inspector and campaigner of the need for wars to be just and sane. And we're now dealing with a world with very few of those. Thanks very much for joining us, Scott Ritter. As always, let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls right up until Gayatri. Stay tuned.
And obey my order, you will be targeted. Out.
This is coalition warship.
As IRGC radios scream, we will target you at a US destroyer. Is the Strait of Hormuz now one step away from a shooting war on the waves? When Iranian forces warn they are ready to open fire without warning, how close are both sides to crossing a line that neither can easily walk back from?
US Navy warship transiting in the vicinity of Fujay Port and Oman Sea. This is Sabah Navy. This is Sabah Navy. Last warning, last warning, last warning.
With last warning blaring over the radio and guns allegedly locked on, was a US destroyer just minutes away from a direct clash with Iran's guards? As shocking IRGC footage shows a direct face-off with an American destroyer, is Tehran using the camera as much as its cannons to send a message? If Iranian forces are captured on video threatening to blow US warships out of the water, is this now information warfare, or a preview of the next Gulf crisis? As peace talks fail on land, Iran is now warning US Navy ships in the Strait of Hormuz, raising fresh fears that the next escalation could erupt at sea. On April 12th, Iranian state media dismissed the US naval move near Hormuz as a failed propaganda stunt that backfired on Washington. Security sources quoted by Press TV claimed the operation was extremely high risk for the US, hinting that American ships were sailing into a trap. That same day, Iranian outlets released footage they say shows IRGC units issuing stark warnings to nearby US warships. In the clip, aired by Press TV, Iranian voices can be heard ordering American vessels to change course and stay away. This is the last warning. This is the last warning, Iranian personnel repeat over the radio, driving home the threat. The US ship responded that it is transiting under international law and does not intend any provocation or hostile act. American voices even reference the temporary ceasefire, stressing that both sides are supposed to be de-escalating, not trading threats. Despite that, Iranian forces escalate their tone, ordering the warship to alter course immediately and leave the area. If you don't obey my order, you will be targeted. Out, an IRGC controller radios, in what sounds like a direct threat to open fire.
Every office has a naysayer. Meet Steve. The office naysayer loves going against the majority.
According to Iranian reports, the destroyers USS Michael Murphy and USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., both Arleigh Burke class, attempted to enter the Strait of Hormuz on April 11th. Press TV claims that Iranian cruise missile batteries locked onto the ships while attack drones circled overhead. The report dramatically alleges the destroyers were only a few minutes away from complete destruction if they had pushed further. Iranian forces supposedly issued a 30-minute ultimatum at the mouth of the Gulf: turn back or be hit. Press TV insists the US ships immediately retreated once their crews realized cruise missile radars had locked on. Support helicopters reportedly flew overhead as IRGC units ordered all other vessels to stay at least 10 miles clear of the showdown zone. The Iranian account says later radio traffic shows US crews fully complying with IRGC demands and pulling away. Tehran's narrative frames the US transit as an attempted pressure tactic on negotiators in Islamabad that ultimately failed. The US Central Command, however, tells a very different story. saying both USS Michael Murphy and USS Frankie Peterson Jr. transited Hormuz on April 11th as planned. CENTCOM frames the operation as a mission to set conditions for clearing IRGC sea mines and ensuring safe navigation in the strait. Admiral Brad Cooper said, "Today, we began the process of establishing a new passage, presenting it as a deliberate freedom of navigation move." A U.S. official told Axios that the destroyers crossed in both directions without any Iranian units issuing a warning or challenge. USS Michael Murphy reportedly even activated its AIS transponder during part of the transit, openly signaling its passage like a civilian ship. This latest claimed standoff comes right after US-Iran ceasefire talks ended without a breakthrough on the diplomatic front. After 21 hours of intense discussions in Islamabad, US and Iranian negotiators failed to reach a peace deal, leaving a fragile ceasefire overshadowed by tension at sea. The rare in-person meeting, the first of its kind in over a decade, had raised hopes of de-escalation before ending in disappointment. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance later said the discussions were held in good faith, but acknowledged they had not produced any agreement. Vance added that Washington had put forward what he called its final and best offer, arguing that Tehran chose not to accept key conditions, particularly on nuclear commitments. Donald Trump, meanwhile, struck a defiant tone, insisting that the United States had already won the conflict by defeating Iran militarily, regardless of whether a deal was reached.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of reports. They've been meeting for many hours, as you probably have noticed. We'll see what happens. Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win. We've totally defeated that country. And so let's see what happens. Maybe they make a deal, maybe they don't.
Is it a good sign?
From the standpoint of America, we win. One other thing that's happening is that boats are sailing up and heading out to our country. Big, beautiful tankers, and we're loading them up with oil and gas and everything else. And pretty beautiful thing to see.
What about China release Iran's assets? Have you agreed to release Iran's assets in other countries?
We're going to see what happens. We're in very deep negotiations with Iran. We win regardless. We've defeated them militarily. They've dropped a couple of water mines, you call them water mines, in the boat. We've defeated all of their water boats too. Their Navy has gone 158 ships. They have 28 water droppers, mine droppers, they call them. All of them are sunk. They probably have a couple of mines in the water. We have mine sweepers out there. We're sweeping the strait. In addition to that, we're negotiating. Whether we make a deal or not makes no difference to me. And the reason is because we've won. Whether you listen to the fake news or not, you know, it's amazing. Their credibility is down to 13%. The media credibility down to 13%. Think of it. We defeated their Navy. We defeated their Air Force. We defeated their anti-aircraft. We defeated their radar. We defeated their leaders. Their leaders are all dead. And now all we do is we'll open up the strait, even though we don't use it, because we have a lot of other countries in the world that do use it that are either afraid or weak or cheap. I don't know what it is, but we were not helped by NATO, that I can tell you.
Modern American history happening right before our eyes. We're being told that this is a peace process, that the United States and Iran are sitting down in Pakistan to avoid a wider war, that cooler heads are prevailing, but I don't buy it for 1 second. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to explain why I think this whole thing looks less like a peace summit and more like a tactical pause, a political reset, and of course, a setup for somebody else to take the blame when this whole thing blows apart. We are being conned. Don't fall for it. Even the White House reportedly backed away from a big victory speech on the ceasefire after advisors were worrying internally that the deal was too vague and too fragile to sell cleanly. And now we learned this weekend that already the Israelis are saying this thing is going to collapse. The ceasefire is going to collapse, and we are going to strike Iran massively. So does this sound like it's going well? And then you should tell you everything you need to know. When a ceasefire is real, you don't tiptoe around it. You don't plant your flag and declare success. But this one came together only after Trump has spent days threatening Iran in apocalyptic fashion over the Strait of Hormuz, including that insane warning that a whole civilization could die if Tehran didn't move. Then suddenly, right before the deadline, the whole tone shifted and we got a 2-week pause, and Pakistan brokered peace talks. This is not what confidence looks like. That's what a rushed off-ramp in the middle of a bad strategic position looks like. And of course, the same 10-point plan that Iran pitched weeks ago, the one that Trump said was no way, we're not doing that, was suddenly now workable. His words, workable, and would lead to a ceasefire. So don't believe it all for a second. Well, you can believe whatever you want, but I sure don't. So look at what is actually happening right now while the cameras are pointed at Islamabad, Pakistan. Israel is still hitting Lebanon. Iran is still insisting that any real ceasefire has to include Lebanon. The Strait of Hormuz is still the central point of leverage. Iran is demanding sanctions relief, frozen assets be released that are being held in Qatar, and they want compensation for any destruction of their infrastructure, and they want recognition of its position as the owner of the Strait of Hormuz. Good luck with that. All the while, the U.S. is still demanding free navigation through the Strait of Hormuz, and they want nuclear concessions. And Bibi Netanyahu on Saturday morning came out and said, look, they still have uranium. So any discussions are off the table unless all of their uranium is removed. It's not going to happen. In other words, the core disputes that could reignite this war have not been solved at all. And this is where Brandon Weichert's warning mattered. He posted this yesterday morning on Saturday. He said, as talks between Iran and U.S. begin in Pakistan, it should be noted that, one, neither party will be meeting physically together. They're actually in separate rooms. Okay. Number two, U.S. claims that they sailed a destroyer through the closed Strait of Hormuz as a clear provocation, trying to remove mines. And they were actually, if you listen to the Iranian side, kind of ushered away because there was threats of drone strikes on these U.S. destroyers. So they backed down. The Trump administration keeps flowing assets into the Middle East, clearly preparing for another round of fighting. And the Iranians are also bringing a new Chinese air defense systems in. So this ceasefire isn't going to hold, according to Brandon. Now, Brandon's basic point is simple. Don't get hypnotized by the words talks. Just watch the military posture. Watch the shipping lanes. Watch all of the hardware being moved there. Watch all of the weapons and soldiers being moved to the region, the new aircraft carriers that are arriving. Because while these talks were being rolled out, 2 U.S. warships were moving through the Strait of Hormuz as part of an effort to try to set conditions for mine clearing operations. And then there is the other side of this chessboard, China. U.S. intelligence indicates that China just sent a massive amount of weapons, shipments to Iran, including air defense systems. All of this is now flowing right into Iran from China. And don't forget also Russia. So while Washington is telling the public that this is all about diplomacy, the battlefield logic is still moving in the opposite direction. That's why I think the real headline here is not that Iran came to negotiate. The real headline is that Iran still holds the leverage that matters most. Trump can say Iran has no cards all day long, which is what they said. Iran holds no cards. Okay. But if the strait is still the choke point, if energy markets still care, if ships need permission from Iran to go through, and if the whole region fears escalation, then Iran absolutely has the cards. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. In fact, right now, Iran may be holding the entire deck of cards. And then let's talk about the battlefield reality, because that's the part of the spin machine that they want totally buried. A U.S. F-15 downed over Iran. Many other aircraft, U.S. aircraft, also downed over Iran and destroyed. U.S. aircraft were destroyed or hit during that rescue mission to try to get that F-15 pilots. So the mythology that the U.S. controls the skies over Iran, it's total BS, and you all know it. Scott Ritter on our show this week explained that Iran's air defenses have been whipping us.
So the Iranians are whipping us. I mean, yes, we can go in and drop bombs, but this isn't, and anybody who thinks that we have air supremacy over Iran, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. And they're not telling you the truth. We vastly underestimated their air defenses. And that gets to the bigger strategic picture. Professor Robert Pape has argued that what we're looking at is the worst strategic defeat for the United States since the Vietnam War, and that Iran has emerged from this war as a rising fourth center of global power. Listen.
This may even become worse, a bigger defeat than the Vietnam War. Well, Iran has, in just 40 days, emerged as a rising fourth center of world power.
This pause is all about trying to scramble and try to resupply weapons we don't have. The Trump administration now spending billions of dollars to try to get new Patriot system missiles up and running, new interceptors. It's going to take a long time to build those. Now, let me tell you why J.D. Vance is at the center of all of this. I think he is being positioned as the patsy, guys, the fall guy here. Now, remember when all this started, Rubio was physically by Trump's side at Mar-a-Lago in the Situation Room. They released the photos to show us all, right? Notably absent. Who's absent from these photos? J.D. Vance. Yeah, Vance was in the White House Situation Room with Tulsi Gabbard and others. So optics matter. Those photos matter. These choices matter. Not in the same room. Former Trump official Anthony Scaramucci says that J.D. Vance is being thrown into the wood chipper by Trump on purpose.
I told you J.D. Vance, like in the movie Fargo, is going to go through the wood chipper. And so conspicuously,
gross.
No, conspicuously not in the room during the Venezuelan thing, conspicuously not in Mar-a-Lago during the Iranian invasion.
Now, whether you believe Scaramucci or not, doesn't really matter. It's all happening. You can see it before your eyes, right? Politically, sending Vance to these talks is actually brilliant if your real goal is to restart this war later on. Because if Marco Rubio goes and fails, then everyone says, fine, the Hawks want bombs anyway. Rubio's a neocon. Of course, he wants this whole thing to fail. He wants to relaunch this war. But if J.D. Vance goes and fails, if the more restrained figure goes and fails, if the guy with credibility among anti-interventionist conservatives goes and fails, he's supposed to be anti-war, then suddenly the White House can turn around and say, hey, look, even JD tried to. Even JD couldn't get them to budge. So I guess now we have no choice but to restart the bombing. This is how you manufacture consent inside your own base. Trump even telegraphed this a week ago.
He's working on the deal, right? How's that moving? Is it okay? The big deal? You see it happening? So if it doesn't happen, I'm blaming J.D. Vance. If it does happen, I'm taking full credit.
That wasn't just a joke. That was a tell. And then late last night, J.D. Vance admitted defeat. Right on cue, the talks failed, and he's flying home to the United States.
We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement. And I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement.
And then just like clockwork, early this morning, President Trump saying effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. So like if Chinese ships try to get through and they're settling transactions, we're going to block them now? Like this was all theater. And then President Trump jumps on Fox and Friends first thing this morning to say that he could destroy Iran within an hour.
I could take out Iran in one day. I could take out in one hour.
So all that to say, I would not fall for the ceasefire theater here at all. It's a joke. I would watch the destroyers, the mine clearing, the Lebanon strikes, the Chinese weapons reports, the Hormuz leverage, weapons being restocked. So that's where the real story is right now. So that's the news update part of today's video. And thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. Now I want to tell you about today's sponsor.
Hey, all other little furry stuff. Then Junior feel like he can pull up at this place, cameras everywhere, bring these NBA federal goons. They prepare. Look at them boys. He bring them cats up there to rob to beat and rob and humiliate. Nigga, he beefing with online.
Many of the 13 U.S. military bases in the Gulf region are reportedly nearly uninhabitable, exposed as defenseless and failing to defend themselves. In a recent report on April 11, 2026, Al Jazeera journalists gained access to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, where various U.S. facilities and aircraft operated during the war against Iran, showing parts of the base completely destroyed by Iranian missiles and drones, causing extensive damage. Footage reveals the damage Iran inflicted on U.S. interests at the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command and other military sites in residential areas linked to U.S. assets and infrastructure. Satellite imagery shows a military communications facility at the base, which housed several satellite dishes and antennas, many of which appear to have been damaged or destroyed. Al Jazeera revealed the destruction of a $1.1 billion early warning radar, AN/FPS-132 system. Iran successfully neutralized Brain, one of the most important ballistic missile detection systems, with a detection range of up to 5,000 kilometers, and is connected to defense systems such as THAAD and Patriot. This is one of the most painful losses for the U.S. Meanwhile, Al Jazeera has aired exclusive footage showing the impact of an Iranian ballistic missile on Ras Laffan Industrial Complex, the heart of Qatari gas sector, as part of Tehran's harsh response to U.S.-Israeli aggression. The sequence, which illustrates the extent of the attack, targeted one of the country's most strategic energy sites. The attack occurred in March, well before the current fragile ceasefire. While no official damage assessment has been released, reconstruction costs are likely to run into the billions, and are unlikely to be covered by Iran. Leaked reports claim the U.S. and Qatar will have to spend $20 billion on Al Udeid reparations alone by 2032. The U.S.-Israel war on Iran is not over, and Iran has signaled that U.S. bases across the region must be closed. Its unstoppable hypersonic missiles could destroy them at any time, plunging the U.S. into the Stone Age in its wars in the Middle East. Rather than providing security, U.S. bases have become focal points for Iranian attacks, raising questions about the future of U.S. and Gulf military cooperation.
And Iran to try to transition from the ceasefire to an actual peace agreement. Could you share with us how the negotiations are going?
Well, the negotiations have collapsed, and as I think most Iranians expected, the United States was behaving as it usually does. In other words, with arrogance and without any regard for sovereignty and for the independence of nations. Trump regime has basically attempted to dictate terms to the Iranian people, and obviously that is something that is unacceptable. They failed during 40 days of war, and they cannot win at the negotiating table, meaning forcing Iran to lose. And we're seeing the the United States turning into an openly extremist regime, where even the media now is calling for the murder of the negotiators, Washington Post, and Western elites, think tankers, and others are naming individual, naming, sorry, naming me, naming others as targets, which is not going to have an impact on the way in which Iran conducts itself. It's only exposing the United States and the empire even further. So we are on our way back, and we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, I saw the same article in the Washington Post, and this rhetoric coming from leaders that is the best way to put pressure on Iran to accept America's terms is to essentially threaten to kill all the negotiators and the people are there in Tehran, as well as the political leadership. This is quite a thuggish language. But do you know why, or at what area did the negotiations run into an end? Because what I understand is, well, from what I understood, there was 3 rounds and they all broke down, and Vance made some comments that Iran failed to meet America's demands. Where was the most difficult point to make a deal?
Well, the United States simply does not accept Iranian sovereignty. Iran's nuclear program is legitimate, legal within the framework of international law. And the United States wants capitulation. The United States wants control over the Strait of Hormuz. And there are a host of different issues. The point is that the United States was not serious at all. In fact, from the beginning, when we were on our way here, the belief was that this is probably a ploy to have more information about the whereabouts of different people. But the Iranians felt that even if the negotiations have no use, it is important for the Iranian people and for the people across the world to see that the Islamic Republic is engaging in that it is seeking solutions, because the same Washington Post that is calling for the murder of our delegation would also say, if we did not come to Islamabad, that the Iranians do not want a solution. So I think the negotiators, Dr. Gandibov, the Speaker of Parliament, made the right move. But my opinion, and I said so before, and so have others, that my opinion was that these negotiations will lead nowhere. And I think those who've been following me yesterday at the media center on the sidelines of the negotiations saw that I was highly skeptical. But in any case, I think the chances for renewed aggression are very high. We see that the Israeli regime is slaughtering innocents in Lebanon and in Gaza every day. And the Western media and Western governments are looking away because, of course, they support these genocidal attacks. And I think that quite probable that a renewed assault on the Iranian people will begin in a not so distant future.
So there's no fallback option here. Does this mean going back to war, or will they wait out the ceasefire period and then go back to war, or do you expect, the hostilities to possibly start immediately with the U.S. possibly targeting the Iranian delegation there in Islamabad as they all headed back home?
If you have tried multiple oral antidepressants
Well, first of all, do show this a few hours after I leave, so it doesn't cause distress for our families. Um, but I think that anything is possible. The United States may attack today, attack tomorrow, next week. The Israeli regime, they can attack at any time because these are regimes that have no dignity, no honor, no sense of morality. The last two wars, the 12-day war that we had last year, was was a blitzkrieg assault that happened as we were negotiating, as you know, and it was intended to catch us off guard, which wasn't really the case. I mean, this is a myth that has been spread around. The Iranians were expecting attack, but of course their weapon systems are advanced, and so they struck and hit or without us being able to defend ourselves properly. And the recent war, if you can hear me, recent war was the same. We were negotiating. The foreign minister of Oman, again, sorry for being repetitive, but he spoke of significant progress and then were attacked again. So there's no reason to imagine that Trump, Netanyahu will wait for 2 weeks. If they do, it's only to rearm themselves. But of course, Iran is also rearming. I mean, some people say you should not wait and you should continue the war and not accept the ceasefire. Actually, I think that that's not really a strong argument. If you recall, during the 12-day war or after the 12-day war, when after Netanyahu was begging for a ceasefire for the last 3 or 4 days, ultimately we accepted, and people were saying, why did Iran just continue? Well, back then, Iran knew that if the war continued, the United States would join. And we had significant shortcomings in the way in which we were fighting the war, because we'd never fought a war with it in this new era with the new technologies. And so during those 8 months before between the two wars, Iran made many changes. And during this 40-day war, roughly 40 days, the Iranians emerged much stronger than during the 12-day war, even though the aggressor was much larger. The Israeli regime is not can't be compared to the United States, and whatever the Israeli regime has, of course, is from the United States and the West. But the point is that Iran spent that time wisely to reorganize and to prepare itself and to be able to both improve its defensive and offensive capabilities. So I think that right now, as we speak, the Iranians are themselves as well. Of course, we're not aggressors. We don't initiate wars. We've never initiated a war. Since the revolution, we've been attacked by the West 3 times. Saddam Hussein, when he invaded, the West supported him. They gave him chemical weapons, and during the last 3 months, the U.S. entered the war directly. Then, of course, the 2 wars that we've seen in the last year. So we've never initiated hostility, and we've always been responding. And even during this war, every time the U.S. and the Netanyahu regimes, they escalated first, and then we would respond. But we never escalated. So we didn't begin the war. We didn't escalate initially. Every time in response to their escalation, we would escalate. I'm just saying this. I know you know this, but I just want your viewers to keep all this in mind. These are, I think, significant points. So those who are saying that Vance is different from Witkoff and Kushner, no, they're no different. He's just as he's captured by the forces that dominate U.S. politics, just like everyone else. And I think it's extremely naive for people to think that there are factions in the Trump regime that are more distant from the Zionist lobby. and that their factions that are closer. These negotiations showed quite clearly that the intention of Vance and his two bodyguards was not to find a solution.
This is what would happen to your body if you ate mood sleep gummies every day. Day 1, you take your first gummy at bedtime. Maybe expect.
I got the impression one of the sticky points around the peace agreement would be how to resolve the issue of the Strait of Hormuz. That is, Iran, possibly with participation of Oman, would set up essentially a toll to get reparations. First, I got the impression the U.S. opposed it, and then the U.S. at least want to participate in it, get in on the action. Again, I'm not sure how much of this is correct and to what extent this impacted the negotiations.
Well, I haven't been. Actually, they're in a meeting now where they're discussing what took place, and I've been very busy with media, so I'm not up to date, up to speed on these issues. But you're correct. That's more or less what happened. And of course, next time, if God willing, if I'm around, I'll get more information, and I'll let you know. On the way back, I'll probably get a fuller picture of what's going on, if that's any use. But and of course, reparations is legitimate. This was a war of aggression, and it was unprovoked. And Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz is in accordance with international law. Even though international law doesn't exist anymore because we now live in the with the law of the jungle. But the point is, though, that there are multiple areas in which Vance was basically demanding capitulation, and which that capitulation is not working. Iran did not lose the war, and in any case, Iran is a sovereign country. It didn't carry out aggression against anyone, so the demands made by the empire are just for us totally unacceptable at multiple levels. Iran is not like any other country, perhaps on this planet. It's fearlessly independent. It has principles. I would argue vehemently that Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is by far the most principled state. And despite all the Western propaganda, the reality is beginning to show. Here in Pakistan, the West, their proxies in the Persian Gulf, have tried for decades to create hatred towards Iran, and largely by spreading extremist ideologies here. But the Iranian delegation is treated as celebrities by people, as heroes. And it's amazing how much loved Iran is across the country and across the different communities and different segments of society. So the reality is shining through. I have no doubt that the United States is not going to succeed in their hegemonic. Sorry, my cough will go away. In their hegemonic ambitions towards Iran and actions of resistance. I do not believe that the Israeli regime will succeed against Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the most heroic force in all of this. They struggle to draw Israeli forces away from Gaza during these 2.5 years. And ultimately, they made huge sacrifices. And I think after what has happened in Syria and all, increasingly the documents are coming out of the policies of the Al-Qaeda regime in Damascus are becoming clear. Hezbollah, I think, for anyone who used to make claims against it, has been vindicated. and its course of action in Syria. Obviously, it was absolutely correct in opposing ISIS and Al Qaeda, and they made the greatest sacrifices for the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza. So people are waking up to this reality that the Western and narratives and Qatari, Erdogan, Saudi, Emirati narratives are not reliable, and Western narratives are not reliable. And I'm optimistic that despite the painful days ahead, and sorry if I'm not focused because I'm constantly looking to see if they're moving towards the vehicles to go to the lead. But I'm very optimistic about the future of this region, and I'm sure that the empire will be defeated across the region, and the Islamic Republic of Iran will be able to emerge as a key power in Western Asia, Western Asia, but to stand up against.
Two ways to trade with Kraken. Whether you're buying crypto instantly on the go or executing
Ethno-supremacism and genocide.
Yeah, I know you have to get on the plane in a second. So yeah, just please let me know if you have to go. But let me just ask, if the U.S. now not if the U.S. has walked away from the negotiations, what cards do they have to play if they're going back into war? Because as the negotiations were going on, Trump was taking to social media, arguing that they were already clearing out the mines in the Strait of Hormuz because the Iranians didn't know where they put the mines, apparently. Well, again, this is, we don't have to take him on his words. And then also that American warships were already sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. And if Iran wouldn't essentially abide by U.S. demand, the U.S. may put up a naval blockade. The last one, I'm not sure it came from Trump. That could have been the media. But, well, what do you think the Americans are going to do if they go back now to the military option?
Well, it's quite possible that they'll go after key infrastructure or humanity, but Iran will immediately retaliate and destroy the oil and gas and infrastructure in the Persian Gulf region because those regimes are complicit. And right now, if the United States strikes Iran, it still has to do it through these countries. So when Iran strikes back, then there will be no more oil and gas, whether from the Red Sea or the Persian Gulf. And that will be permanent. And if they blockade Iran, that oil too will no longer be contributing to the market. So it'll create a further crisis, further energy crisis. I think Trump is moving towards destroying the global economy and pushing the world towards a global economic depression. Not recession, but a depression. And we're already moving in that direction, as you know, and hardship is coming, but it's not something that happens overnight. It's not it's not like when they bomb apartment blocks in Tehran or Beirut or Gaza, where people are crushed underneath immediately. What these wars are doing is that it's creating massive shortages of energy and of petrochemicals and the fertilizer and so on, and other problems that are multi-layered. That's the money that these Arab dictatorships make. They go to the U.S. stock market, the bond market, they purchase U.S. goods. These are no longer happening like before. And so I think that the problems that this is going to cause will be not sudden overnight, but because we're already moving towards crisis mode, it will be quite quick. But I think Trump mistakenly thinks that he can work wonders and that Iran will capitulate, or that he'll defeat Iran overnight with his overwhelming force, or that if he destroys Iran's electrical power plants or whatever, that the Iranians will come and submit. It's not going to happen. We saw what happened during the last 40 days. It was exactly as we had predicted. And this is something that you and I have been talking about for a very, very long time now. Since the beginning when I had the pleasure of being on the show. So I think that Trump is going to cause great harm to the global economy, unless, of course, something happens where he backs off, which at the moment, because he is surrounded by Israeli cursors, I don't see that happening because their priorities are not the United States. Kushner, Witkoff, the Zionist lobby, the Israeli regime, their priorities are not the American people. Their priorities are not the global economy. They're not India or Brazil or South Africa. They're the Israeli regime. And so they will sacrifice whatever they feel is necessary for the Israeli regime. As Joe Kent pointed this out very openly in his resignation letter, the highest, high-ranking, the second highest ranking, I think, intelligence officer appointed by Trump in his resignation letter said that this is all about the Israeli regime and the Zionist lobby. Iran is not a threat. Iran is not making a nuclear weapon, but they want this war, and it's not for America. It's for the Israeli regime.
Just my last question, though. Do you know anything about the mood or the tone of the negotiations? I mean, in the media, of course, we see the direct threats against killing off the Iranian leadership and the delegation there with you. But do you know how it was with Vance and the American negotiators? Was it hostile or professional? Do we have any other information about how this negotiations went?
Well, I would right now, if I was over there, if I was 20, 30 meters away from where I am now, I would probably be able to answer that question. But I'll get more of that, and I'll let you know, because they're actually discussing last night. Because since it was very late at night, they were awake till morning, and then of course when Vance decided to leave, the plans changed. So I don't know the tone, but my understanding is that they were basically dictating terms. They were making demands, and they expected capitulation. And to me, they're living in an alternative universe. They have no idea what Iran is about, or they do, but yet they're saying, "Who cares? Who cares if the global economy crashes? It's all for Netanyahu."
Yeah, I was surprised by the language as well. And when I heard that the Iranians failed to meet our demands, I thought this is if it sounds as if they were coming there expecting
Yes,
capitulation. So
they didn't meet our demands.
oh well. Anyways, I know you are rushing out of Islamabad there, so thank you very much for taking the time.
Sorry if I haven't really contributed to your.
Massive stores that waste your time, so you can shop fast and get home fast.
Happen in terms of the Iranian delegation, if they're going to change their mind or they're going to change their sort of policy, their strategy, but nothing of that sort has happened, because what the United States was asking for, it was somehow beyond, what Iran has expected. And basically what we've learned so far is based on, because I cannot trust what Axios or these sort of the mainstream media basically is putting out, because they're making some sort of rhetoric. They're trying to influence, manipulate the public opinion, or in the society in the United States, out of the United States, in Europe, here in Latin America. They're trying to make new rhetorics. They're not trying to report basically what has happened, it didn't work. And what we've learned from the Iranian side so far is that the United States from the reports of Axios, they're talking about the United States wanted to put an end to this toll system that Iran is applying to the Strait of Hormuz. But the importance is something else. What has happened was the reality is something else, because the United States wanted to share the benefit of the toll system that Iran is applying in the Strait of Hormuz, and making some sort of benefit from the Strait of Hormuz. Iran said, no, that's not going to happen. The second point was the enrichment, the enriched uranium. They wanted that to be shipped out of Iran. And Iran said, no, that's not going to happen, because that was on the table before this war started. We were talking about how to downgrade or downblend the enriched uranium, the more than 60% enriched uranium. And that's not on the table. We can negotiate, we can find some sort of solution for that, but we're not going to ship that out of Iran. And the third part was that they wanted Iran to stop enrich uranium on Iranian soil for 20 years. And this is just the boldest red lines that Iran has. Nobody can ignore Iranian rights to enrich uranium on its territory, because it's not something coming from the outside. It's totally domestic. Everything, the knowledge is domestic. Everything is domestic. Each and every particles, each and every equipment in these facilities, nuclear power plants, are Iranians. They have built them from zero, from scratch. And so just getting back a little bit to how did we get here? What has happened? Why did the Trump administration start this negotiation? He tried to reach out to Iranian side to talk with them. What we've learned from the Iranian sides, the story is totally different from what we've heard in the mainstream media, basically what the Trump administration is trying to put out. And it's Donald Trump, when they started the war on February 28th, it seems that the war was not going the way they wanted it to be. And the regime change didn't work. Then they decided to go beyond regime change. They tried to hit. We know that what has happened with the supreme leader of Iran, together with commanders, many high rank people were killed, assassinated during this operation. And they thought that that's going to collapse the whole society in Iran. That's going to bring some sort of drastic change to the society, to the leadership in Iran. So they can find someone more moderate, someone who's going to be able to do whatever the United States could achieve in Venezuela with Delcy Rodriguez. They literally thought that that's going to be the outcome. If not regime change, they're going to do something similar to what has happened in Venezuela. But in reality, after 10 days in this war, after 10, 12 days, they reached to the point that now this war is not going to work. It's not working for Israel. It's not working for the United States, because during the first 10, 12 days, 15 days, Iran basically destroyed everything in the Persian Gulf. All these bases in the Arab states, and together with radars in Israel. So they basically destroyed most of the radars in the Persian Gulf, in GCC countries. Then the United States tried to send messages. They started, 15 days or 12 days in, they started sending messages to Iran through Turkish government, the government in Pakistan, and somehow initially with the government in Oman, but later on it shifted to Turkey, then to Pakistan. And they started sending messages to Iran over and over, 2-3 times a day, or as the Iranian side said, 2-3 times a day. The Pakistani government was calling them over and over each day. And let's talk, let's negotiate, let's find some sort of solution. That was the whole plan on the part of the Trump administration. You have to understand what has happened to Donald Trump, finally declaring after those ultimatums, 48, 5 days, 48 hours, 5 days, 10 days, then back to 48 hours, then Tuesday at 8 p.m. This has some sort of history behind it. So then during these sort of messages that they were sending to Iranian side, they said they sent this 15-point plan or proposal to Iranians, which made no, it was totally beyond, and it wasn't based on the reality. It didn't make sense for Iranians. So what has happened since they sent the 15-point proposal to Iranians? Iranians have been receiving the calls from the Pakistani government over and over, asking them what is the reaction. The Pakistani government said the reaction is obvious. The Iranians said to the Pakistani government that we are not agreeing with any of these points that were mentioned in this 15-point plan. So they insisted. They said, so what would be your counter argument? What would you send to the United States to counter that, to send to what are the terms, what are the points that are acceptable for Iran? Then Iran prepared this 10-point plan. They sent it to the United States through Pakistani government. They sent it to Pakistani government. The Pakistani government received the 10-point plan proposal. They said, that to Iranian side, they're feeling that the United States is not going to accept these points, but they're going to send it to the United States. They sent it to the United States, the Trump administration, here comes the moment that Donald Trump is talking about 48 hours ultimatum. It was literally the moment that they have received 10-point plan. They said 48 hours, 5 days, 10 days, back to 48 hours, because they were thinking about the 10-point proposal of the Iranian. During those days, Donald Trump has planned this raid in Iran. The last moment, one of the final goals on the part of Donald Trump was to attack Iran, to do something on the ground, because they were told that roughly 50% of enriched uranium is in Natanz, in Isfahan. So they can go there, they can grab and just get out of Iran. They did that operation. The operation has totally failed. They lost a lot in that fight. And then Donald Trump issued the final, ultimatum. It's going to be Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and it's going to be the end of Iran, the end of civilization in Iran. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But there was no negotiation, as I mentioned before. There was no negotiation. It was 10-point proposal sent into the United States, and the whole time Donald Trump himself was negotiating, I don't know with whom, with Benjamin Netanyahu or some people within the Trump administration. They were negotiating among themselves. It wasn't any sort of negotiations, active negotiations with Iran, because it was all about the messages going in and out. Nothing of negotiation has happened behind the scene. Then Donald Trump came with the idea, I'm going to accept 10-point proposal. Let's talk about it. Iranian side said, no, that's not going to happen this way. You're going to tweet, you're going to post it on your social network. You're going to post it and saying that the negotiation is going to be on this 10-point proposal. He mentioned that in a post. Even he retweeted the Iranian foreign minister's tweet on X, accepting, reiterating, or, reaffirming what the Iranian party is talking about. That's why that was the main reason that the Iranian side decided to go with this negotiation in Islamabad. They didn't want to go there. So Iran, that's when it came to this moment, you remember right before the Iranian side going to the Iranian delegation going to Islamabad, it was one of the basic, they had preconditions. One of the preconditions was the situation with Lebanon, the attacks on Lebanon. Because right after the ceasefire being announced by Donald Trump and his administration, we had a brutal attack on Lebanon. They destroyed many buildings and killed many civilians in Lebanon. And they said the target was Hezbollah, which we know that basically most of the targets were civilians and people. They were killed and they were assassinating people in Lebanon. It was unbelievable what has happened in Lebanon. I think later on we have to learn more about what has happened in the initial moments right after the announcement of the ceasefire. But putting that aside, Iran said, no, if you're going to accept the ceasefire on all fronts, we're going to negotiate with you. These are preconditions. And Donald Trump and his administration, they said, yes, we're going to do that. That's why Iran has decided, even until the last moment, they didn't want to go to Islamabad. They accepted. Then the negotiation came in. What was happening on the part of Iranian? You see 5 groups of people, economic group, legal, political. They had one of the, the former head of Iranian central bank. They were all there to negotiate, to do something important, something substantial, to find some sort of solution, not solution, just a framework of what would be the negotiations, what would be the basics for the negotiation, the foundation of negotiations. That's what has happened so far, what was in the mind of Iranians. They were there, and the people, when you see the combination of the people in this delegation going to Islamabad, you see mostly those people who were criticizing JCPOA. We had the people who were criticizing JCPOA, who were part of, who were agreeing with JCPOA. I'm talking about Joint Plan of Actions during the Obama administration, that nuclear agreement, JCPOA, between Iran and the United States. So they had everything there. These people were capable of making an agreement, a framework for the upcoming agreement between the United States and Iran. What we know that the Trump administration is all they're thinking of is reaching some sort of deal. What does that mean, reaching a deal? Is that going to be a deal? Deal, it means that something that you make and you just leave the other party alone. But this is not a deal. This is an agreement. You have to respect the agreement. In a deal, you're just selling your car and just going away. An agreement is something beyond that. It's something diplomatic. We know that if they wanted to negotiate seriously about the enriched uranium in Iran, they have to come with a grand strategy, because it's a tremendous work. Just remember what has happened during JCPOA. Hours and hours negotiations and talks, not only politicians, but also technical teams talking to each other, interacting with each other, and finding some sort of solution, some sort of agreement to the scene. That wasn't the case for the Trump administration. These people are not serious about negotiations. They want to make a deal. They want to benefit. They want to benefit from the Strait of Hormuz. They want to benefit from everything that is happening because after all, what they care the most is the oil, is the energy, is the money that Donald Trump going to receive. This is the whole agenda on the part of Donald Trump. They're not negotiating. They're not serious. That's why Iran has asked not Jared Kushner together with Steve Witkoff. They've asked someone else to come to these negotiations, which was J.D. Vance. They thought that J.D. Vance is going to be some sort of difference to the negotiations. But after all, I don't see something, the atmosphere has changed a little bit because of J.D. Vance, but they stayed the same sort of, the mindset was the same. They want to gain, they want to grab something. Nothing is in the Strait of Hormuz to be grabbed by the United States. They can grab nothing. And looking at what has happened, Donald Trump those ultimatums were not, pressure on Iran. He was begging for negotiations behind the scene. What we were witnessing on the scene, it was the ultimatums. He's going to destroy everything. But behind the scene, he was begging for negotiations. And right now, here is what he said to Fox News.
They come back and they give us everything we want. And I told my people, I want everything. I don't want 90%. I don't want 95%. I told them, I want everything.
What does that mean? Everything. You can grab nothing. The Strait of Hormuz is under the control of Iranian. He's talking about right now in the reaction of the collapse of the talks, because the United States wanted to impose its terms on Iran. They literally ignored their agreement on 10-point proposal, literally, because that was the framework. That's why the Iranian has decided to go to Istanbul, to Islamabad, to Pakistan. They said, no, we're going to redefine the points. You have to accept our terms in terms of the nuclear weapons, the Strait of Hormuz. Even with the case of Lebanon, they didn't change anything in Lebanon. The war is going on. Israel is attacking Lebanon. Lebanon is responding to Israeli attacks. So they did nothing. Right now, Donald Trump is talking about a full blockade on Iran. So what does that mean? It's a new war? The guy has failed to understand that Iran is not Venezuela, because he thought that he's going to do the same to Iran. He's going to do regime change as he did in Venezuela. And Iran has proven so far that Iran is not Venezuela. Domestically, militarily, economically, they're far different. They're not even a little bit similar. Nothing is there. I understand Venezuela. Venezuela here is in Latin America. I understand the country. I know how it works. It has nothing to do with Iran. Militarily, economically, geopolitically, domestically. And he wants to, he says that they're going to get back. They're going to come back to the negotiations. They're going to, accept not 95%, 100%. I'm going to get everything. I have a bad news for Donald Trump. You're not going to get anything if you behave this way. Nothing going to be. The administration going to achieve nothing. If you're going to, the worst thing has happened to Iran so far. The war has happened. Iran is prepared for everything. It doesn't matter if you want to use a nuclear bomb, go ahead. And if you think that's going to help you, nothing going to help Donald Trump but understanding the situation he's in, the trap he has made for himself. Nobody made these sort of problems for Donald Trump and America and the United States. It was a trap by Israelis. He just stepped in that trap and he doesn't know how to get out of that trap. The blockade that somehow it seems that it's some sort of new idea. It's a grand strategy on the part of Donald Trump right now. How can you do that? Your aircraft carrier is far, far away from Iranian coast. I'm sending a new, a massive fleet to Iran and they're going to implement blockade. He's going to make, the whole concept of these negotiations was based on the difficulties, the economic difficulties that the whole world is experiencing right now, this global turmoil. The difficulty, the Japanese government, the government in South Korea, Europeans are feeling the heat, are feeling the pressure, the stress of this war. It's not about in Asia the same. So Donald Trump, instead of facilitating, you remember he just lifted the sanctions on Iranian soil as a reaction to what has happened to the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, he's telling us that he's gonna go the opposite way. He's gonna increase the effects of the Strait of Hormuz. Who is gonna confront each and every country in this war? One of the main question is the United States prepared for that? Go ahead and do it. You're going to do, how is that possible? Blockade. You have to be far away from the Iranian coast because they're going to hit you. They're going to hit you hard. It's not going to be something, it's not even, because he's right now talking about Venezuela. I'm going to do the same that I did in Venezuela, this blockade. Nothing in, nothing out. You cannot do that. Iran doesn't need, if it comes to the whole blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran can go with other borders to the north, to the east, to the west. They're able to do that, basically to the north. They don't need basically the Strait of Hormuz. They can stop, they can put an end to everything in the Strait of Hormuz. And those people in the Trump administration, they don't care about the GCC countries. Nobody's caring about the GCC countries, because the worst case would be Iran hitting and destroying everything in these countries as a result of this war, as this escalation is just somehow suggested by the President of the United States. What would be the outcome for Donald Trump? Is that going to work? Is he prepared for, a barrel becoming $200? It's going to go there. It's going to go $300, $250. And I don't see that happening. I don't see Donald Trump being capable to go in that direction. If he goes in that direction, it's a suicide mission for him. It's a suicide. That's not going to help him. That's not going to bring Iranians to their knees. It's not a strategy. It's some sort of suicide. You are in a trap. You decide you want to suffer from this trap. You want to get, Iran is helping you. I believe these people who went to Islamabad, they somehow helped Donald Trump to get out of the trap he has made for himself, or Netanyahu made for Donald Trump. But it seems that he's so happy with Netanyahu. The guy, literally hours after the announcement of the ceasefire, attacked Lebanon and destroyed everything. The guy doesn't care about ceasefire. Israelis are so happy. I don't know if you saw the footage in which J.D. Vance, he before leaving Islamabad, he had some sort of, speech before leaving Islamabad. He mentioned what is happening with the negotiations. You see Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff coming in. You see how Jared Kushner is somehow smiling. They're happy. They don't want negotiations. They don't see negotiations being beneficial to Israel. They want to put an end to negotiations. They want to go to escalate. As far as the American soldiers are fighting for Israel, that's okay for them. Because they want everything for Israel. They want to sacrifice everything. Look at the difficulties that Europe is experiencing right now. Difficulties in the Strait of Hormuz, GCC countries, in Iran, in Lebanon, in Asia, Japan, South Korea. It's all about Benjamin Netanyahu's grand strategy, which wasn't a grand strategy. It was a grand failure. Look at what has happened to Israel since October the 7th. Is this a strategy? Is this a government with a strategy? They destroyed everything. Today, they mentioned, on Israeli media mentioned, they cannot get back to the war without the United States. If they're alone, they're not able to get back to the fight because there's nothing to fight. There is nothing to fight. For Iranians, they know Israel is nothing for them. They knew that since day one. They didn't want to start it. Netanyahu wanted to start it because they wanted the United States to fight their war in the Middle East. Yesterday, what was happening, the Israeli prime minister together with the defense minister, Israel Katz, they were attacking the government in Turkey, saying that the government in somehow is so naive, is so weak, because Iran has attacked them. They couldn't respond to Iran. Iran has said over and over they didn't attack Turkey. The attacks on Turkey, on Azerbaijan, they were attacked. Those attacks were false flag operations because Israel doesn't want to fight a war against Iran. Israel is not capable of fighting Iran. Israel wants the United States to fight Iran. Israel wants Turkey to fight Iran. Israel wants Azerbaijan to fight Iran. This is what Israel wants. Israel has managed to convince these GCC countries, basically I'm talking about UAE and Saudi Arabia, to convince them that your future, your destiny is to fight Iranians. Because we are together good, we are amazing. But the moment Iran is down, they're gonna teach a lesson to these GCC countries. Because these countries are nothing. They're nothing. And Israel gonna grab them. They're just gonna invade and kick, they're gonna do the same as they did with the southern part of Syria, as we know what is going on in the southern part of Lebanon to the Litani River. They're gonna go beyond Litani River. This is the agenda on the part of Israelis. But what is amazing to me that Donald Trump is somehow, he made so much rhetoric. The propaganda is so thick. It seems that he's buying himself into these sort of lies. He reiterated these lies over and over, these rhetorics, this propaganda, that he literally is believing what he's talking about. You have to understand what has happened. Why were you begging to negotiate with Iranians before? You have to understand what's going on. He's gonna fail with this blockade. You're gonna remember what Donald Trump is trying to do. He did everything. Regime change failed. Social engineering in Iran, some sort of coup in Iran has changed. It doesn't matter how many officials are you gonna assassinate or you're gonna remove from the scene. It doesn't change anything. Iran knows what it wants. Iran knows that it's defending itself, because Iran is not the aggressor. Iran is defending itself, its sovereignty. And Iran is not, militarily, economically like Venezuela. We know that Venezuelan people are not happy with this situation, but the government was not able to avoid what Donald Trump planned for them. And they're playing in the hand of the United States right now. But Iran is something different. It's totally different. And I think Donald Trump somehow, sooner or later, he's going to learn his lesson. He may go to escalation. He may attack Iran. But the blockade is not going to happen. You're going to see American destroyers, you see American ships being sunk in the Persian Gulf or beyond in the Arabian Sea, because they are totally under the Iranian fire. They can do everything. It's not just about missiles. It's about drones. And Iran has a lot of them to fight back. It's not even 20%, 25%, 50%. Based on what Donald Trump is talking about, it's 100%. He said everything has been destroyed, 90%. Just a little bit. We just need to go there a little bit of, resistance, that we're going to destroy all of it and we're going to get out. We're going to get the deal. They're going to be 100%. That's not going to happen. This is the bad news for Donald Trump. If he's trying to find something, you better find it through some sort of talks. If not, no, the best way, in my opinion, Iran doesn't need to negotiate with the United States. Iran doesn't need to go. Iran needs to make everything, to make the United States understand everything that they're asking for. The 10-point plan is not going to change. You're going to see nothing going to change on the part of Iranians. Some technical issues can be discussed by technical teams when it comes to the nuclear program of Iran. But the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian right to enrich uranium on its soil, that's not going to change. The war between Israel and Lebanon, that has to come to an end. No negotiations on that. These are solid terms on the part of Iranians. And Donald Trump has no choice but understand the Iranian position. I think someone in the Trump administration needs to describe the situation on the battlefield. If he doesn't know that, he needs to understand it. The problem is that he's really thinking that 80%, 90% with Iranian missiles, ballistic missiles, drones, air defense system, everything was destroyed. If someone thinks this way, his decision's going to be totally delusional. No decision this administration based on these rhetorics would make based on reality. The reality is not there with Donald Trump. And after all, I don't see negotiations. You know, those people who were in Islamabad, who were somehow thinking that this guy, J.D. Vance, is going to be a serious person to negotiate with, they're not feeling that way anymore. Because a huge risk for Iranians, just remember, look at the Iranian delegation going to Islamabad. It's a huge risk for them to go to Islamabad and get back, because they're right in the middle of this war. They know how Israel behaves. It was a great risk on their part to go to Islamabad. But they made that risk. They did that because they thought that the Trump administration is serious. These guys are not serious. It doesn't matter who's negotiating with the Iranians. And I think these are huge lessons for the Russians as well. It's a huge lessons for Chinese. China has just made its move toward Taiwan. You know, the leader of opposition of Taiwan went to China, talked with Xi, and they know what is the future for Taiwan. They know that the United States is not able to defend them if something happens. China can just get everything in Taiwan. It's a decision on the part of the Taiwanese government, on the part of Taiwan, to decide about it. I think after all, they're coming to that sort of they're getting to the point to understand that the United States is not able to defend them if something happens between China and Taiwan. Taiwan is a little island. It's not even Ukraine to be connected to the other countries, to send weapons, to support them, to send mercenaries, to send forces. China is monitoring everything in Taiwan. They know each and every move in Taiwan. So the government in Taiwan understands, I think, the war in the Middle East brought this sort of sanity to the mind of the leadership in Taiwan to find a political solution for the conflict, for the disagreements between Taiwan and China. That's gone. Donald Trump is not going to be able to do anything. It's irreversible for Donald Trump. You can consider Taiwan as, getting closer and closer to China, I think, as time goes by. But the Middle East is of great importance. What would be the reaction on the part of the Chinese government? What would be the reaction on the part of India? The situation in India was so, it was so dire that the government, the Trump administration just, they removed the sanctions on the Iranian oil to let the Indian government buy oil from Iran. Because India is in a desperate situation when it comes to the energy. They need the energy. They have to buy it. Is Donald Trump going to, with this blockade, is going to, devastate the Indian economy? Is it gonna, because so far we've seen the governments going to Iran, basically the Japanese government. We had the the South Korean envoy going to Iran, negotiating with the case of the Strait of this new mechanism in the Strait of Hormuz, the tool, the toll booth that Iran is thinking of. And Iran is charging them. They're paying. They're happy to pay and get out of, the Strait of Hormuz, to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has come to a solution against the United States and Israel, which is not a nuclear bomb. It's the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz it's 20% of the energy, not only energy. We have fertilizers. We have LNG. We have everything coming out. The food security is in danger with the Strait of Hormuz. Just imagine this blockade happening. So what would happen in the Bab el-Mandab, in the Red Sea? That's not part of the equation. That has not been part of the game so far. And they're going to come out with a new block, with a new, sort of management for the Bab el-Mandab. How is that possible for Donald Trump to fight on both in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, in the Strait of Hormuz? He doesn't understand the gravity of the problem that he's making. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that anybody in the United States is able to, to talk with this administration. These people are totally delusional. They don't understand the reality of the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandab. You remember the Bab el-Mandab, the United States under the Trump administration went to the Red Sea to defeat Yemenis and Ansarullah. They failed to defeat them. Then Donald Trump has announced capitulation. They have capitulated. It was Donald Trump capitulating before leaving the Red Sea. It wasn't Yemen. And he's trying to do the same right now. He's trying to double down. He's not looking for a solution. He's not capable of negotiating. The guy has negotiated nothing so far. In the first administration, in the second administration, you remember, IBM treaty. They withdrew from IBM treaty. This guy is not there to make, to make agreements. All he thinks is deal, how he can get money out of anybody. When it comes to the Greenland, he's, somehow he was threatening Europeans with the case of Greenland. If they fail to go in the Strait of Hormuz to fight Iranians, to fight Iranian army on behalf of the United States, because they're totally afraid of getting to the Strait of Hormuz to fight Iranians. What's so funny? Israel is afraid of getting involved. Even with the ground invasion, Israel said, we are not going to be part of the ground invasion. It's going to be Americans, American Marine. It's going to be American soldiers going there. Israel is sending the United States. The United States has failed to do anything. It's trying to put pressure on Europeans to go and fight Iranians in the Strait of Hormuz. It's getting ridiculous. That's funny. It's tragic what's happening. Nobody seems to understand. Nobody seems to care what Donald Trump is talking about. Look at Fox News. They're just helping him to make new rhetorics, to get more radical instead of getting down, instead of understanding the reality of what is happening. This is the ultimate failure of the U.S. empire. These are the signs of a declining empire. When we talk about an empire that is in decline, these are the signs. Everything is collapsing, and the guy is talking about, I'm winning. It is the biggest win in the history of the United States. When you see this sort of disconnection with the reality, you feel, you somehow understand how delusional this administration is getting. Nothing. The Strait of Hormuz was open before this war started. It's not there anymore. The United States cannot open it up, open the Strait of Hormuz by using force. Nothing can happen. It's so easy for Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz. It's so difficult. It's impossible, almost impossible for the United States to open it up using forces. The only solution for the United States was these negotiations that they have failed to negotiate in a good faith. This is the reality of what's going on. I don't know what comes next. If we accept, to my understanding, every time Donald Trump tries to escalate, he's trying to pretend that he's escalating, but he's somehow behind the scene, he's collapsing. These are the signs of collapse. These are signs of panic when you talk this way. I'm gonna send a massive fleet to the Persian Gulf around Iran to implement a full blockade on Iran. Nothing in, nothing out. They're not gonna survive the situation. He doesn't even understand Iran. He doesn't know the geography, the basics. I don't know how you can let the president of the United States talk this way. It's unfortunate what's going on. And I hope there are people who are able to influence Donald Trump. So far, I haven't seen anybody being capable to go in that direction, because his best friends right now, they're not those people who are realistic. They're not those people who supported him to win this election. Even Charlie Kirk is not there anymore. Everybody knows what has happened to Charlie Kirk. Who's there to help him is Tucker Carlson. Who cares about the United States is Tucker Carlson and the people like Tucker Carlson. They're not, we don't have many of them who are influential, who are close, who are able to communicate with the Trump administration. But nobody, this administration has lost its capability, its ability to talk with the people who love, who've worked, who supported this administration. That's not there anymore. Laura Loomer is the advisor of the Trump administration. Mark Levin. These are the people. Lindsey Graham. We had Marjorie. You remember Marjorie Taylor Greene was defending Donald Trump when nobody was out to defend Donald Trump. In the worst days of Donald Trump in the United States, everybody was against him. But Marjorie Taylor Greene was, she was supporting Donald Trump with everything she had. And right now, she is the first enemy of Donald Trump. He's going against each and everybody, because all the Zionists are around him, and the Zionist agenda is not American agenda. The Zionist agenda is not for the future, for a better future for the United States. It's all about the greater Israel. It's about the agenda of greater Israel. That has failed. It continues to fail. The disconnection is not just happening in the United States with Donald Trump. We've seen yesterday Benjamin Netanyahu coming out, the new plan, talking about Iran, Yemen, all these countries, how we're somehow managed to destroy them, and we're in the process of destroying them. The guy is not, the guy is living in a bunker. He's not out. He's not talking correctly. He's not talking appropriately with his people. And he's somehow talking the way that I have a grand strategy. I'm going to make, a new change in the Middle East. That's not. These guys, Trump is delusional. Netanyahu is delusional. I don't know who's gonna talk with Donald Trump in the United States, or he's gonna fail. He's gonna see how the economy, the global economy, would react to this sort of blockade that he's talking about. Because it's not on Iran. Before the blockade hitting Iran, it's gonna hit the global economy the way that Donald Trump has never imagined. And he doesn't have that sort of, that sort of willing to understand the reality. He's not willing to understand the reality. He wants something like Pete Hegseth to come out and say, big, powerful, destroy everything, no morality, just go and destroy. He wants these people. When you talk this way, it means that you think a little. You don't think properly. You just talk. This is the problem. And I hope we can find some sort of solution to what's going on. And I'm afraid that it's going to be the same as we've seen with the case of Russia. Russia said, finally, negotiations in Alaska have failed. That's why Russia has decided to go, everything going to be decided on the battlefield. I believe that Iranians are getting there as well, that everything going to be resolved on the battlefield. And that's what's going on in the mind of Iranians right now. They're prepared. And he's saying Israel is preparing, is getting back to fight. Go and fight. You want to fight? Go and fight. Israel, no interceptors. The capability, America the United States is short of cruise missiles. They lost their offensive capabilities with the case of the cruise missiles. Air defense system in Iran gonna show him a surprise. They're gonna go there and they're gonna find how they're gonna hit these fighter jets down. And that's gonna be a new battlefield. And they're prepared. Israel is naked right now. They don't have interceptors. Maybe Benjamin Netanyahu, before leaving, his position in Israel, he wants to level Israel before leaving. This is the main goal, I think. After all, look at what he has done so far. He's literally on that path, on that track to get there, destroying everything in Israel. But is Donald Trump gonna go there with Benjamin Netanyahu? Is this the America that he wanted to build? Is this about, the domestic production? All the companies come in, force them by tariffs and everything? Is that the agenda? No. The guy is fighting Iran in the Middle East. He's not making the United States great again, as he was, deceiving people before coming to power. I can assure you that what Donald Trump is seeking for in the Middle East is going to destroy the American empire. It's going to destroy the American empire. And the Trump administration is so, just look at the hubris of this administration. Look at the arrogance. They don't listen to anybody. Nobody's, you see, even those people who were so close to the administration criticizing, bringing out some positive points that you can think of, at least. They said, don't go to war. Don't go to war in the Middle East. That's a huge mistake. That's a colossal failure. He made that mistake. And he's struggling to get out of those problems that he himself created for the United States. This is the reality. Let's see what he's going to do. And I'm sure that Iran is prepared for everything. Iran was fighting the United States strategically. It's all planned. Each and any level of escalation, Iran is planning for each and every level of this escalation. They know if they do this, they know what would be the response. Even with the nuclear weapons. They know. I'm sure they know because I talk with them. I receive the response. I receive the confidence in their eyes. I talk with them. I know that they're prepared for everything. And I hope Donald Trump understands that. Thank you so much. I think we're going to learn about more with this blockade and what
Morning Futures on Fox News saying it's called all in and all out. We think that numerous countries are going to be helping us with this also, but we're putting on a complete blockade. We're not going to let Iran make money on selling oil to people that they like, that people that they don't like, or whatever it is. It's going to be all or none. Let's be joined right now here by retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, research fellow at Defense Priorities, military expert. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And when you hear the word blockade, you're saying no ships in or out. What will it take for the U.S. Navy to accomplish that?
Well, fortunately, because the strait is so narrow, it won't take much, and most of our ships are probably, or at least a good portion of them, are in the Gulf of Oman, or just not far out of that. So it would actually be a fairly easy thing to do to keep anything from going out. That's not the hard part. The physical blockading something is fairly straightforward. The difficult part, though, is to taking actions to physically block something, because the question is, what are the rules of engagement? If something tries to force a blockade, are you going to sink it? Are you going to blow it up? Are you going to try and board it? What if it's a Chinese vessel, a Chinese-owned vessel, a Russian-owned vessel, or some other country that doesn't accept the blockade? What are we going to do then? Because that's the real issue there. This could blow up quite significantly if some of the Chinese ships, for example, are interdicted here or attacked, because the Chinese may consider that attack on Chinese sovereign territory if it's their flagged vessels that are in there. So this could get pretty messy pretty quick.
Yeah, and obviously you talk about that because Iran saying that if there is an attempt to stop some of the movement from the Strait of Hormuz, they'll say that is a breach on this ceasefire. At what level does it become that breach that they might have to call off the ceasefire?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, that's a call that they have to make. They can decide what constitutes a breach. But I mean, if I would just venture a guess that if you fire on a vessel that tries to force the blockade or perhaps board it, they may say that violates. But honestly, that depends on them. That's, again, a decision they make at the political level. But then, that puts us in the difficult place on the physical level. But I'll also tell you, in that same Truth Social that President Trump put out this morning, there was another challenging problem in there. And way down on the list, he said that he would also go after ships that had already transited, that had paid the fee to get through. He may also chase them down. And we do know quite a number of them are Chinese vessels. So it's a question about, how expansive is this? Blocking things out of the Strait of Hormuz is one thing, but going after ships on the open sea that have been ships, for several weeks, that could be a lot more difficult of a task.
Yeah, that would be a big undertaking. And you mentioned that it might be simple just to put a stop sign there saying they cannot pass. But does that take away assets from other potential strength postures or other strategic assets in that region? Just putting in this blockade, does it take away from something else?
I don't think so, because truly it's not that hard to block something like that, because you just need a few ships, and because the range on a lot of our missiles and whatnot are substantial, you just don't have to have that much. It truly is a political decision to block it, and if something wants to try and run the blockade, then you're going to have a political decision. Are you going to fire on it, board it, or whatever? But in terms of the physical requirement, it's just not that much. But the ramifications of that decision are quite profound. And then on top of that, you also have the other issue that one of the reasons why we lifted sanctions on Russia and on Iranian oil earlier in this process is because we need the flow of oil to get out as much as we can to keep the global price down. And if we say nothing's going to come in, not even this trickle of 6, 7, 10 ships a day, if even that doesn't get out or in, then that's going to probably drive the price right back up, because now then even what we wanted to come out isn't. So there's a double-edged sword to this. It's not all that we can just impose pain on the Iranian side.
I know you keep reiterating that it might be simple to blockade this, but if you put ships there, obviously there was concern about going through the Strait of Hormuz, just the proximity and the threat that it might be to U.S. assets in the region. If there's a blockade there, does that increase the risk for U.S. assets to have those vessels somewhat close to the Iranian coast?
Well, I mean, no more than it is right now, because, I mean, there's any assets there, American or otherwise, are at risk of being hit. We've seen in the opening rounds of this war that quite a number of ships did get hit, but they haven't so far, there hasn't been much of that so far. I think that was primarily an attempt by the Iranian side to say, look, we have the capacity to do this and we're going to demonstrate it. And now, as long as you guys follow our rules and, abide by our toll system, that doesn't have to happen to anybody else, which is how it's been ever since that time. So I don't think that this would cause any more of a risk, unless, of course, it's a risk of retaliation. Now, if the Iranian side wants to, they clearly have the capacity that if you start interdicting ships, especially if you start firing on them, they can definitely start just torching all kinds of ships in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, especially because it's like fish in a barrel, almost literally. So there is a risk of that, yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting that you note that, because we talk about this, the blockade taking place. Is this any step in terms of getting toward Karg Island? We talked about that as well, some of the refinery in the center of this, so very vital to Iranian oil and their kind of production of it. Is this a pathway to anything that you can foresee?
No, it's just not effective. I mean, it doesn't affect it one way or the other. If there is still some intent on having a ground incursion into Karg Island to try and seize it by force, that's just as possible now during a blockade as it was before it, and just as unwise, because the same risks that we would have going in with no blockade or with the blockade aren't going to have any effect on the ability that the Iranian side has to attack our forces if they got on it. So that still remains a high risk operation, and I don't think this makes it any more or less likely.
And what are we talking about? Because we're talking about the ceasefire now. It's 2 weeks in place. The negotiations are failed. What is the United States thinking militarily? How are they using this time to strategically prepare for what potentially comes at the end of the ceasefire?
Yeah, I mean, if we're just being honest, at least on the military perspective, I have every confidence that the U.S. military and the Iranian military probably did not expect this to result in anything except for a pause. And so I think that both sides took advantage of it. I know the U.S. did, because President Trump put it out on Truth Social and said that they're using it to rest up, to rearm, to refit. We've seen a significant airflow of C-17s, C-5s, C-130 aircraft to go in from the United States and elsewhere to basically bring new ammunition, new weapons, new missiles, et cetera, because we had burned through a lot. I mean, according to the CENTCOM, it was over 13,000 targets had been fired, had been attacked rather. And so you can imagine how much ordnance that's going to be. And then, of course, all the interceptor missiles that have been fired. And those things don't grow on trees, so to speak. So you're going to have to replenish them. And I think that this 2-week pause was very instrumental in saying, hey, we're going to have to bring more stuff in, or otherwise we wouldn't be able to keep up the sustained rate of fire that we had. We had to bring some more in. And of course, there's a big problem with the inventories themselves being depleted, and how many more do you have to bring in? But that's certainly what we've been doing. And one can imagine that the Iranian side was probably doing the same thing, taking advantage of the opportunity, maybe moving some assets around, especially in some of these underground missile cities that they have. They may have had to move some more stocks inside there, because they've been doing a lot of the construction, the physical building and the manufacture of these missiles and drones underground in the protection of a lot of these mountains. But, they probably used a lot of the natural resources they have to build this. So they probably had to move some in. So I would imagine that they took advantage of that opportunity. So bottom line is, it looks like both sides are just gearing up before the end of that time, if it doesn't get restarted even before that.
And what do we look at the end of it? Because we saw President Trump saying it was somewhat shocked that the Iranians took out and targeted some of the Gulf Arab states. Will you assume that that is going to be the case following this, especially if there is a blockade and some of those countries also suffer from the lack of the oil getting out?
It could, but so far the Iranians have been pretty careful about what they target, when, and why, and it's been in response to other things that were done to them. If President Trump makes good on one of his Truth Socials from last week, where he said that either he's going to get a deal he wants, or he's going to go after their energy infrastructure, their bridges and civilian infrastructure and that kind of thing, then the Iranians said, then we will go tit for tat, and we will then hit all of these countries, their water treatment facilities, desalination plants, oil production plants, oil distribution systems. I mean, all kinds of things that could knock them offline for an extended period of time. They will do that, but I think only if we go and hit those same kind of targets in the Iranian side.
What else are you looking at? Because you mentioned Chinese ships. If the United States has this blockade and they try to get through, what are the rules of engagement generally in terms of that? Can the U.S. stop them? Can they board the vessel? What does the rules of engagement look like?
Yeah, there hasn't been any specific rules of engagement published that I know of. And since we're not at war with China, we don't have anything published that we would stop them. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why both Russia and Chinese ships and planes especially have come in and landed, and we can only guess and speculate at what's in there. Maybe our intelligence knows, but publicly, we don't know what's coming in on a lot of these aircraft. But we have seen increasing information that's been leaked by our intelligence in Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, that China is increasing the amount of help militarily that they're given, not just in targeting and intelligence, but now all of a sudden so-called dual use things, technology to enable them to build more drones, other kinds of missiles especially. But now then there's some question is, are they actually going to start providing physical technology? Are they going to give them drones? Are they going to give them radar systems, air defense systems, air defense missiles? These kinds of questions are starting to pile up, and evidence is starting to pile up that this has already started to escalate. If the United States does anything to physically cut off all the flow of oil out of the Persian Gulf, so that nothing, it can't even get to China, it's not out of the question that they couldn't ramp up their support for the Iranian side. So that is another potential risk that we have to calculate in. How much sense does it make? Because this may not end up being just us against Iran.
Yeah, and I also found it interesting in that post from President Trump talking about how there's a blockade, but also noting that other allies might be involved. And we've talked about it, the fact that he's been so very critical of NATO and their lack of response, their lack of urgency in this. Is he once again calling on other countries to get involved? And do we expect that to happen even though it didn't happen before?
That's certainly the way I read it. And I doubt anybody reads it any differently in Europe. And I think that the threshold for Europe to do something on this one will probably be higher. Will be lower. So I think that there is a better chance that you're going to see them do this. One of the reasons that they did not answer the call ever to force open the Strait of Hormuz or to bring ships in to patrol or to escort tankers through is because everybody recognized that would be nearly a suicidal mission, because Iran has a half a dozen ways that they could either attack, sink, strike with mines, underwater mines, torpedoes, drones, artillery, you name it, and you just can't defend against all of that. So nobody wanted to put their ships into a no-win situation. But to say we'll send some to help a blockade, I suspect that might be better, because then they can sit off at a distance, and anything that comes through the Gulf of Oman, I mean, it's a pretty narrow passageway, and so they might do that. So I think that my guess is that you'll see some movement on that, because there's a lot less risk for the troops, for the ships there. But we'll see. I don't think anybody's going to be eager to do it, because nobody wants this to go on. Everybody wants that oil to open up, and having a blockade that could take a lot of time. It could take time for any country's ships to actually get there. And every day that all the oil is blocked out of the Strait of Hormuz is bad for the price of oil everywhere, to include Europe. So I bet they don't want to, but I think they probably would.
And we saw last week, it was the chief of NATO, Mark Rutte, in Washington, D.C. at the White House, meeting with him about such topics. So we'll see how much urgency, or like you said, lack of urgency there might be. Lieutenant Colonel, what else are you watching over the next 24, 48 hours that might signal where this is heading?
I think the first thing I'm going to look at is to see does anybody take any action? Does anybody do anything to break the ceasefire before the 2 weeks is up? I mean, you have Israel has continued to attack, at least as I saw earlier this afternoon, continues to attack into Lebanon, which was one of the prerequisites for the Iranian side, along with some reparations of some sort, or unfreezing of frozen assets, that they would need to be able to extend this. And that was one of the big breakdowns of these talks overnight, that the Iranian side, the Israeli side didn't agree to that, and they continued to attack into Lebanon. Apparently they limited some of the strikes, but they're still doing some of them. So if that continues on there, is Iran going to end up being the one that breaks it? Because they're going to say, you've violated the two primary terms we said as prerequisites, therefore our hands are untied. I rather doubt it. I rather think that they'll take advantage of every day they can get without an American or Israeli bomb falling on them is a day that they'll cherish and be happy about it. But then the question is, what will the United States do if President Trump puts this into immediate effect and some ship tries to run the gauntlet? Then what's going to happen? Who's going to shoot first? And that's what I'm looking at when that deadline, that 2-week deadline, comes to an end. who's going to be the one to restart this, or is there going to be some new diplomacy? Are they going to try to find another round to try to get this over with? I certainly hope that's the way it works.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We keep pushing this 2 weeks in the distance. Those negotiations failed, but there's still an opportunity for more talks, hopefully in the near future. All right, thank you so much.
And I'll just point out, listen, I mean, it took years to get the Vietnam War over. It took a year and a half of intense negotiations to get the Korean War over. And so I don't think anybody should have expected a single day to get this complex situation over when you basically have three combatants with Israel and the United States and Iran. So I don't think that we should say one day didn't work, so let's go all in war. But I think we should definitely consider this a process, because even Trump said in that True Social you put up there, he said many of the points were agreed upon. Let's take those and continue to advance forward and see what we can get done.
Yeah, and even that most...
Kofi follows me.